Seinen is a genre, and I watched every single anime to ever come out from it. Compared to its more flashy, more brand-friendly younger brother, Shonen, Seinen is unfiltered, raw, and are home to some of the most profound, some of the most grandiose, but also some of the most outright strange shit I've ever seen in my entire life. So in a place where shit could genuinely turn from mature to edgy, from anime to hentai without you even realizing it, what is the worst seinen? And that was an easier question than I thought. Because this show, well, Mysterious Girlfriend doesn't really even have competition for this spot. It takes it effortlessly because it literally made me throw up while watching it. It might have the most icky premise I've ever seen before, just straight up. So this show is about a strange transfer student, and by strange, I mean strange. She would randomly start bursting out in laughter when nobody told a joke. She would sleep through every single class without interacting with anyone. So then our protagonist finds this girl asleep in class in the evening, wakes her up, and then when she leaves, feels compelled to taste her drool and swallow it. Soon after, he breaks out in a fever, and the girl randomly shows up to his place and explains to him that the reason he is sick is because he is feeling withdrawals from her drool. So then, throughout the entire show, the protagonist gets hooked on consuming her drool, and they get together in a relationship. It's actually so nasty, but when I'm not gagging at this shit, I'm actually just laughing my ass off at scenes like this. The only commentary I could possibly have is that anime was a mistake. The only thing I could think of while watching this insane shit was, first of all, consciously trying to hold back my throw up, but also I kept thinking of that one meme that goes, I can fix her MFs when they have to drink gallons of her saliva just to stay healthy. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking about this. I'm personally getting grossed out just by talking about it. Yep, so that was the first entry into the tier I'm calling The Ugly. These are a select few shows that are so uniquely bad that they personally offended me in their own fucked up manner. And I just want to preface this by saying this list is still in order from worst to best, but the tiers represent a significant jump in quality, from the shows at the top of one tier to the bottom of the next. So keep that in mind and stay with me because we are just getting started. If you have a love for oppa in your heart, then this anime is definitely for you. Oh god, fuck me. Story, who really cares out of 10. Art, K-cups out of 10. Sound, bounce out of 10. Man, you took up the sexiness to a whole nother level with the inclusion of realistic flop smack sound effects whenever a pair of tits came out and started to move around. Okay, I think we get the point. Let's move on. Although this anime is still airing, I can already say that it's by far the best show of the summer 2011 season. Behind the seemingly juvenile premise of breast and samurai, there lies an intricate and allegorical plot that reevaluates modern social structures and criticizes conventional power distribution. Recommended by Barney Slayer, who watched a total of 1 out of 12 episodes. So who's right? Is this show some underground masterpiece that the establishment doesn't want you knowing about? Or is it the reason your plain donut turned into a glazed donut without you even realizing it? Well, there was only one way to find out. And oh my fucking god, frame 1? You know, in my experience, when a show starts out with a scene depicting a not safe for life occurrence, then it will likely be one of the most tone-deaf, edgy shows I will ever witness, with Psycho Pass being like the one exception. So Manu Hikinsho lives in this world where your worth as a human being is based on breath size, and the evil organization that everyone is scared of has the ability to shrink breast size through a sword strike and then absorb that breast volume that they just took, I guess, and take it in for themselves. This anime feels like it was some South Park or Family Guy cutaway gag made by some guy who's never watched an anime before to shit on how perverted it is. This shows what I imagine when my 60-year-old physics teacher told us about his traumatic experience walking into the anime club room and him describing what he saw. The characters are all just sentient furniture with tits drawn on them. The plot is just an excuse to show off its soft porn, and the power scaling is literally the characters going from A cup to F cup. It's garbage. It knows it's garbage. The people who watch it know it's garbage, even if they don't want to admit it, and we do also. Why the hell are you here, teacher? I hate titles that are just a question. I don't fuck with that. So this anime is about as shitty as the shit the teacher is taking in the first scene. So this guy gets into some crazy wacky situation where he and his teacher find themselves locked in the same stall while she's taking a shit. So the main character guy assesses this hentai predicament he found himself in and decides that the best approach would be to just go full hentai. So okay, so quick question. What's the difference between these people and these people? The answer is there is no difference. They're all pedophiles. These are all teachers who have had relations with their students. So when this anime is framing it as the woman teachers having a genital conflict with their male students, I guess the show just wants us to pretend it's normal, but it isn't. This show is portraying literal crimes with no other substance to it. The characters are all walking, talking, or gawking self-inserts, and the only purpose this show probably has on this planet is for people to manhandle their ham candle while watching this. You feel me? They're roughing up the suspect, if you know what I mean. Playing the skin flute to it. I could go on for days. The Severing Crime Edge is about a guy with a hair fetish who visits a spirit ghost thing with long hair. And no, you didn't mishear me, nor am I exaggerating. He quite literally has a hair fetish. So this freakazoid approaches this defenseless girl, panting like a dog with a disgusting expression on his face, with a pair of scissors in his hands. Then she does the reasonable thing to do in this situation and invites him inside. Although she explains that her hair is cursed, so it can't be cut. But of course our main character has the only magical pair of scissors that can cut it. Yeah, cool. And then it is explained that a ton of magic tool wielders are out there and they're all looking to hunt the girl down, as she turns out to be the hair queen. I physically facepalmed when I heard that shit. With the premise this stupid, I really hope this show was some absurdist parody, but it takes itself so seriously with one of the silliest premises I've ever seen. The girl is like the most classical trope of a damsel in distress you could possibly imagine. And the romance is so fucking weird between the two of them because she genuinely just looks like a kid. And then the rest of the characters, the magic tool guys, all either just amount to their stupidly exaggerated fetish, or if they don't have a fetish, they're just one-dimensional throwaways. Hey, do you like Hajime no Ippo? Yes? Do you also like Roman historical gladiators? Oh shit, then you'd love Cestus, the Roman fighter. It's about this guy who's a slave and he fights, and the fights aren't even that bad. I just hate this anime like no other. X-Arm is an experience I consider enjoyable compared to this deceiving, diabolical money laundering scheme. Episode 1 looks like this. Episode 2 looks like this. And episode 3 looks like this. And it's not even how it looks like a crime scene. This anime pretends to be historical by just throwing some random bits of trivia at the audience. And then when we see Nero, who is like the bloodthirsty, brutal Roman emperor be depicted as this soy boy pacifist that throws up whenever he sees blood. And I'm also not a history major, but regardless, I don't think I need one to know that if slaves talked back to a noble back in the day, they're not living to see tomorrow. I don't know if the author knows what lore accurate slaves are, but he always has them getting away with shit that absolutely would not fly in reality. So historical, yeah, get that shit out of here. And then honestly, I care more about a used shit-stained single prong toilet water dissolved square of toilet paper than I do anyone in this main cast. There aren't many characters in this show and they're still somehow underdeveloped. The main character too, I mean, I don't even have much to say about him. If this show was a harem, he'd be a good protagonist, I guess. The action is, I mean, I guess it could have been good, but the production team behind the show decided to do the unholy fusion dance between slideshow 2D animation and CG so bad it wants to make you gouge your eyes out. So no, the action is shit. There's no reason to watch this show. This one made me question what a bad anime actually is. Is it a show with bad CGI, green screen explosions, or plot holes? Well, in Taboo Tattoo's case, it has all of those, but it genuinely feels like nobody bothered to storyboard this show. It felt as if the producers were literally just improvising scene by scene. The only thing they had in mind prior to getting high to make this was probably just the checklist of what they wanted the show to contain. Let's see, what do we have here? School setting? Oh, well, obviously that one's a given. Girl with big boobs, token lolly, lesbians, badass Ken Kaneki main character. Oh, and then gore, we can't forget about that one. Everything that happens in this show is just an effort to string together all the shit that the author wants to focus on. Bro doesn't care about no poverty words such as pacing or mood. His ideas alone for this masterpiece is genius like we've never seen before. As long as he hits one of his checklist items, the audience will get a dopamine rush and he can move on to the next thing. Like, yes, lesbians, yes. Okay, all right, let's speed run to the badass main character now. Okay, we got that. I think we know what the audience is craving for next. I know what they want. Yeah, I know what they want. It's the fucking middle schooler with fucking Z cup boobs, bro. Sometimes the show will act upon its own intrusive thoughts. Like, imagine you're having a serious conversation about like philosophy or some shit, and then a joke pops into your mind. And it's not even a good one either. It's just a thought that intrudes for a second, but you know that if you actually say it out loud, it'll basically just put that conversation in the grave. This show does that shit every single chance it could get. It has some serious world building exposition dump, and the mood will just abruptly switch because of some room temperature IQ antics. Okay, so that wraps up the worst of the worst in the genre. So before I move on, I just want to clear up a few things. So here are the rules of the video. I used my anime list to compile this list, and this isn't a sponsor or anything. I'm just saying that I used it because it compiles all different types of anime that were adapted from manga that were in Seinen magazines, and also anime originals that just fit the demographic. So if something isn't on the list, you can blame my anime list. Or you could blame me, because I intentionally filtered out all the sci-fi and harem shows that also happen to be a seinen, just because I gotta leave room for future videos. So without further delay, I introduced the next tier, the bad. And as you could probably infer, we're still in the trenches. Backstreet Girls presents us with a premise so stupid, so controversial, so absurd that when you realize what this show is actually about, you're automatically convinced that it's gonna be the greatest comedy show ever told. This anime is about these Yakuza guys who fucked up really bad on some job or something. Then as they're apologizing to their boss about it, he gives them an ultimatum. Either have their limbs chopped off and their organs harvested and sold, or fly out to Thailand, get a sex reassignment surgery, multiple plastic surgeries, and become pop idols. And you know what pisses me off? With a show like this that definitely has the premise of all time, it's still shit. This show flopped harder in my eyes than Concord. My expectations were sky high, but reality just lowered that bar all the way down to the core of the earth. The production was horrifying. JC staff looked like they were physically struggling, even trying to make the characters' lips flap. The animation itself was dog shit too, like even during the Idol concerts, where I'm expecting the Idol members to be singing their hearts out in that deep Yakuza baritone, and the audience to be going crazy over that Yakuza OCE or the Yakuza, I guess. What we got in that scene in reality was just a PowerPoint presentation. And then also, the show isn't fucking funny at all. Like, how do you fumble so badly? I don't understand. That you get the holy grail of premises, and then you just physically cannot tell a joke for your life. This show got me so mad, and that's why it's so low. From time to time, there comes an anime that isn't satisfied with just being terrible. It goes above and beyond to just straight up becoming criminal. Chitose Get You is about an 11-year-old that is in love with a 30-year-old working man. But actually, it's all good because it's a comedy anime. Although, it kind of bears the risk of becoming criminal if the show is just not funny at all. I didn't laugh once. The PDF file's over there, officer. Okay, I usually never bring up the order I watch things in for my videos, but I watched the show before this. Chitose wrote about it being some unfunny pedo bait, then came to Okusama wa Jinchikose and did a genuine double take. Because this show is about a 17-year-old high school girl that is married to a physics teacher. Not even a crush or anything. Fucking married. And usually in like forbidden love stories, the story would be about how they can't actually be together in reality, but this is just disgusting, honestly. Golden Boy might have one of the most horniest protagonists I've ever witnessed. Harem main characters are usually like, no, don't get on my bed naked, that's inappropriate. And then this fucker is just like,
huh? Oh, my beautiful queen's throne. This is where she sits. But I mustn't think about it. I can't stop. Oh yes, my queen. I love you! Oh, my queen! Oh, you're so naughty!
Although it is refreshing to get away from the copy and pasted, timid, soft-spoken, shy boy who I can snap in half with my finger. But this guy is just going way too far in the opposite extreme. So this show has the classic anime scene where he almost gets caught in the girl's locker room, then hides in one of the lockers, but then he's able to peep through the seams and see all the action. But the reason I'm pointing out this one scene specifically is because this Gooner's commentary.
This is so educational.
There's not a single scene where this character doesn't have his hand on his dick and is actively stroking. Even compared to some horndog teenager who masturbates more time a day than meals he has in that same day, this guy is just on another level. While the normie scrubs are all still tier 3 subs to Pokimane, this guy spends $80,000 talking to an AI chatbot that has the profile of like a deep faked Ice Spice or some shit. And then the worst part is that the show tries to make us believe that this motherfucker is actually a competent, altruistic guy, but then every time we actually see him on screen, he's just being horny again. Gleifnir is about a closeted furry who gets blackmailed by a yandere. Except unlike actual furries, Shuichi has the ability to transform into an authentic animalistic monster. And these powers are explained later on in the story with a pretty decently interesting power system. Although that small crumb of potential was immediately squashed, since this feels like it was written by a middle schooler. But not just any middle schooler, that one middle schooler. You know who I'm talking about. The one guy who'd always wear a hood indoors, never cut his nails, and then if you ever gained his trust, he'd allow you to write a name in his death note. Gleipnir is a show that took a premise with some potential and managed to introduce characters so toxic and unlikable that it single-handedly imploded any hype or perceivable enjoyment the show had. I don't even think edgelords like this show. It's like Mirai Nikki, but the author has fetishes now and the main character's a bitch. I swear to God, when this author thought up the idea of this anime, his first thought was probably the mandatory yandere, of course, and then he was probably like, okay, I need this yandere to be a more immersive experience. So he added the most easily manipulated soy pussy boy who literally gets jerked around and jerked off by the plot and every single character unwillingly. He seriously has no true grip on anything that's going on. For the entirety of the show's runtime, he's just backseat gaming, waiting for some plot point to happen to him or for some woman to sexually assault him. I really don't like this show. This one seemed like a generic fan servicey survival show about 5 girls that get stranded on an island, and while they're trying to survive, the anime starts jiggling some bells and whistles to keep the audience's attention by sprinkling in some absolutely unnecessary fan service. The characters' backstories I thought were lame across the board, the characters themselves were uncharismatic, and the plot as a whole just had below average writing. Ultimately, the show was an easy contender for the mid-tier. Then I saw this one scene where these 2 girls, in order to survive, have to spit bird poop into each other's asses. And combined with other scenes like this that are just purely for shock value and nothing else and making me want to puke, this show will stay here. I obviously did not finish this shit. Chobits is about a futuristic world where everyone has their own personal humanoid computers called persicoms, except for a main character, of course, because he's a bum. But this bum finds a discarded persicom called Chi, and he spends a significant amount of time trying to figure out where the switch to turn her on is located. It turns out that the switch to turn her on is literally the switch to turn her on. Who the fuck designed these robots, man? Was it EDP? Jesus Christ. Oh shit, she turned off by complete accident. Well, it's a hassle, but I suppose it's my obligation to tend to my 13-year-old looking robot girl. I really have no choice in the matter. This anime is like if Epstein and P. Diddy collabed in hell together to pitch an idea they both had for an anime. As this show goes on, we see a little romance develop between them, and it's just not it. Even if she's made of metal and wires or some shit, she's still fucking made to look like plus or minus the square root of our main character's age, so it's still fucking creepy as hell. Anime is weird sometimes. It could go from high schoolers having cooking tournament arcs while suffering from consistent foodgasms to superpowered 3/4 naked Power Ranger girls that can shoot tit lasers. But the worst part is when that goofy weird shit turns into creepy weird shit. It's a fine line, and Tsukuyomi Moonphase crossed it without even looking back. It's a rom-com, and the implied romance that transpires in this show is between a vampire 12-year-old and some dude who is at least in his early 20s. And he could even be in his 30s. We don't even know. You know, as an anime fan, you learn to get used to some really, really strange shit, but this is just not safe for existence. I also just didn't laugh. It wasn't a funny show. The legacy of Sailor Moon is legendary to a lot of people. For many, it was their childhood and a great symbol of female empowerment. It has a legacy so great that some asshole who's never watched it knows enough about it from other people that I could genuinely give a detailed essay of the plot structure of the entire show. So if it was that beloved by so many people, Why the hell are people trampling on that legacy so much? Magical Girl Spec Ops Asuka is another shock value cheap edgy jerk-off fantasy. Its deep commentary on trauma, abuse, war, terrorism, child soldiers, and sex slaves are somehow not deep at all and somehow come across as very juvenile. The fact that the show wanted to do a darker twist on the magical girl genre is fine, don't get me wrong. It's the fact that it relies on the shock value appeal of a darker version of Sailor Moon without actually having good writing or characters. And by the way, when I say that a show is edgy, just to be clear for this video, because I'm probably going to use that term a lot, it's not that I'm some snowflake that can't handle darker themes. It means that the sole selling point of the show is some gore or some other NSFW shit without actually having a valid reason for having it in the show in the first place. Brave 10 is like if you took a seinen, then went to file, and then imported an isekai protagonist. He's this one-dimensional brooding lone wolf who has this mysterious dark OP power. The plot is that this girl's life is threatened by hell assassins and they need to assemble 10 warriors to protect her. There's seriously no character development at all between any character introduced. Even the main character remains a mystery. We never even got a tragic backstory, which was surprising. There's really no reason to watch this. The action isn't great either. Gokujo is about a lesbian who's really horny. Well, you know what? No matter how stupid a premise is, there's always a chance it could be saved by good jokes, because at the end of the day, this does have the comedy tag. But True Bra is about girls who join the underwear club, where they discuss things like size and comfort with underwear. And sure, that's cool, I guess. At first it seemed like something that goes straight in the mid-tier, but this riveting plot concept became wrapped up in a ecchi comedy show. Oh, and I forgot to mention that they're all middle schoolers in the show. Yeah, I think we're done here. Colorful is a show that claims to be a high-concept satire of the perversion of mankind, directed by the same man who crafted the legendary Serial Experiment Slain. But here's the thing. Nobody in this world can put out banger after banger after banger. We all have some misses scattered about somewhere. I mean, look at Kendrick Lamar. He... well, shit. Okay, maybe I'm missing the point of this show, but you say that you're a parody, yet the plot of this show is just shots up girls' skirts and then some incel just saying, look at that ass, man. It doesn't even try to be comedic. It tries to critique horny shit while also being horny itself. B Gata HK is a show that stars a female lead protagonist who is, well, she's wait a second. So she's a bimbo whose sole desire is to bang 100 dudes, and sure, yes, what do I say in a moment like this? Yes, queen, slay, yeah. So she looks at the first male she sees and immediately decides that he's gonna be the one to take her virginity. But I initially thought this was gonna turn into a wholesome romance about how this wannabe bimbo in her quest to be a strumpet learns how to love an average guy. And that does happen eventually, but it wasn't really fun getting to that point. The entire concept of the damn show is this girl trying to get into a situation where she can coerce this random dude into tactically inserting his sausage balloon into her slippery plume. And if the show was supposed to be funny, I didn't laugh. The girl is, at least to me, just not very likable. She's so arrogant that it's just annoying. And the guy is just a block of bland tofu with no seasoning. There's really nothing to it. So it feels like this show just took a quick look at Elfen Lied and decided to basically just do that but subtract everything that made Elfen Lied special or interesting. This show feels like to me that it's trying so hard to cover up the fact that it's just some default harem preset show, but it's not actually marked as a harem on my anime list. It's about these girls with strange powers who end up escaping from some facility, and they all end up crossing paths with this guy, and he's such a nice guy that all the women instantly fall for him. So yeah, this is just some Redditors fanfic with some average fights and below average writing. Alright, entries like this next one is something that I was gonna say make me question the sanity of the people working at my anime list, but apparently Umaru-chan, the manga, was published in a Seinen magazine, so I don't even fucking know anymore. I feel like I'm being gaslit. So Umaru-chan is about Umaru, who's supposedly the perfect high school girl that everyone aspires to be, but the big twist is that when she comes home, she's actually a lazy, hedonistic cretin who shouts and screams all the time. The show is told from the perspective of her older brother for a large part of the show, who takes care of her. I guess I could understand the enjoyment if you find this show funny, or maybe you like the slice of life that the show offers. But even for those people, I can't wrap around my head how you could stand this main character. She's like Asta's soulmate from Black Clover. Honestly, one of the most obnoxious main characters of any show I've ever watched, but that's just me, I guess. So that marks the end of the bad tier. And since we're about to dive into the mid tier, my structure has always been to go through each show, maybe crack a joke or two, and then move on. Since if I elaborate on every mid show on this list, it will genuinely be 6 hours long instead of like 2. So I want to emphasize for this section that I'm taking a 50% writing, 50% enjoyment approach to my rankings. At the end of the day, this is my list, so I can admit that something is well written, but if I didn't actually enjoy my time watching it, it's not going to rank the highest. So with that all out of the way, let's start this tier out with a show that might be a little controversial. Yeah, this one's a throwback. This show really walks a tightrope for 12 episodes. It's perpetually in this limbo where it can go from the most unnecessarily edgy and gruesome scene you could possibly imagine to an emotionally gripping sequence that will unanimously tug on anyone's heartstrings. I'm not saying that this show has good writing, and I'm not even saying that it's necessarily good, it's just that there are certain scenes that feel like the author got possessed for a moment into writing something that wasn't a serial killer for my brain cells. Besides these scenes though, Elfen Lied is solely concerned with these two things: tits and internal bodily organs, aka gore. This show might be the goriest shit I've ever witnessed, in an anime at least, and it also might be one of the most shameless when it comes to fan service. Overall, these two factors are absolutely 90% of why this show ever got so popular. And I'm not even just saying that either. My first time watching the show, I was like 11 years old, and I'd be straight lying to your face if I told you I was watching this shit for the plot. But I did say 90%. I think the other 10% consists of two parts that I genuinely will give the show credit for. The first part is the music of the show, which has some actual heat. From the opening song to just some random music that'll play over some scene where the main character falls on some girl or something. For some reason, it was this show to get the fucking banger soundtrack. The other part is the mystery of these Dicloniuses and the horror behind not knowing anything about them. But the reason this makes up such a low percent is because literally by episode 3, two characters just sit in a room and just detail every single possible fact about them. Their full history, their killing technique, their range, their full scientific name, and even down to how they're fucking born in this world. This series blows its load way too early on, and the rest of the series is just not really thrilling anymore because we got exposition dumped on everything there is to know about the monsters. And then there's the worst part of the show, which is the characters. And the worst character without a shadow of a doubt, is this bitch. She is by far the stupidest plot device I've ever witnessed. So she's like an airheaded secretary whose mission for her entire workday is to bring her boss a cup of coffee. And then the show cuts to Lucy, one of the Diclonius, who broke out of her prison cell, and she's treating all the prison guards like there's some freshly packed meat that she's about to drop into a meat grinder. So then she opens the door to face a firing squad in a blockade of officers. And cue one of the most asinine scenes to ever air on television. So you're telling me she was just camping in this corner, waiting here, just so she could embarrass herself and then shortly kill herself, just to prove to the audience how much of a brainlet she is, and then also, I guess, how much of a threat Lucy is. Although all the characters aren't as stupidly written as her, she's just a snapshot of the greater stupidity of the character writing in the show. Characters never have realistic reactions to anything, and it all culminates to something that had potential to be something that soiled its pants 30 seconds in. Magical Senpai is about a girl who really tries hard to be a magician, but fails. And she always happens to fail in lol funny XD ways. And then, sometimes she even fails in a lewd way. There's more substance to a well-done steak than this show. Concord is the most ingenious creative endeavor compared to this shit. I now die with laughter every time I'm faced with a slice of bread, because compared to this show, anything's funny. Centauro no Naomi is a slice of life about fantasy human hybrid girls doing things, I guess. What can I say about this show? It's different from other slice of life because it has like fantasy aspects to it. Oh yeah, the last scene of the show, they were arm wrestling, right? And then the last line of dialogue in the entire show is, "Why are we arm wrestling?" You can't make this shit up. This show is one big molestation joke. It's about a pair of siblings where the 11-year-old boy has the appearance of a grown man and his 17-year-old sister has the appearance of a child. How did this happen to them? We don't know, and nobody brings it up. The show tries to be funny, but it never works. It got hella old for me extremely quick, and it genuinely just got disturbing at some point. This show has that type of premise that will turn you into an Olympic diver with how fast you're going to jump ship after realizing what this show's about. It's about a high school girl who falls in love with a 40-year-old man. Yeah, so I was immediately turned off, but eventually what I found was a pretty uncontroversial show that just so happens to cover a controversial topic. The guy tries to distance himself from her the entire show and tries to lead her to live a normal high school life. It's just that I never found it particularly interesting or entertaining to watch this guy try to de-escalate the situation after catching the pedo allegations. Working is an example of a show that has been done countless times and will continue to be. It's a comedy that didn't really make me laugh, so strip away all the jokes that had me stoically gazing at my screen. What's left is this show that's basically just a slice of life where this guy started working for a restaurant because there's a girl working there that looks like a little kid. Yeah. The only part of the show that I found slightly enjoyable was when they introduced the guy who was making the food in the kitchen the entire time, and it turns out to just be Sanji. That shit got me laughing. This Art Club Has Been a Problem is a slice of life romance show about middle schoolers in an art club, and it centers around the romance of this girl and this dude who's obsessed with only painting his 2D waifus. And the show is like, You know that one dude from Tower of God? The one guy who just sleeps every chance he gets? Yeah, that was me watching this. None of it ever interested me. I seriously don't even comprehend why it's a seinen. They're literally middle schoolers. So this show gives a voice to the most popular adult film genre, lesbians. It's actually crazy to think of it. Lesbians are genuinely more sexualized than Fortnite skins at this point. I thought we'd never see the day. But this anime focuses on the relationship between two girls. And yep, we could definitely see that they're in a relationship. Yep, they're very, very lesbian. Very much dating. How long does it go on for? Oh my god. Yeah, I'm not even gonna lie to you. They do this shit like every episode, at least that I've seen. It's just a typical high school romance, but this time it's girl on girl action. The characters are alright. The plot is gay, literally, and it's just overall an unremarkable watch. When I say that this show is slice of life with guns, you might think I'm joking. This show has a very exciting start that can only compare with 10,000 other anime. High school girl wants to do club, but club not popular, so she restores club. These episodes had me physically wavering between consciousness, and what made it even worse is that these guns aren't even guns. They're light guns, apparently. So we're just playing fucking laser tag. Genuinely one of the lamest animes I've ever seen. Then we get Bakuon, which is basically just slice of life, but motorcycles now. Look, I know next to nothing about motorcycles or people that drive them, only that they're all assholes on the interstate. And this anime was a sleeper to me. But what if you did know about motorcycles and also have a Punisher tattoo and live in Montana and have a KKK uniform? My point is that I don't even think hardcore cyclists would fuck with this. It's just boring and the comedy just never hit at all for me. Devil's Line is horny Tokyo ghoul, but the ghouls of this world are just called vampires, and they don't actually need to eat from humans to survive. Although human blood apparently gets them high, usually they're indistinguishable from normal human beings until blood is added to the equation. That's when they turn to insatiable bloodlusty monsters. And when I say bloodlusty, I mean that in a literal sense, because they actually get aroused from blood, leading to many scenes of sexual assault and the like. What's weird is that the main character, who eventually finds herself surrounded by vampires, just lets the most traumatic shit happen to her, and I genuinely don't think any sane, normal human being would make the decisions that she made. Honestly, in some parts, this show feels like a vampire grape fantasy that the author is self-inserting themselves into. I really didn't fuck with it. Witchcraft Works is a show I watched, and how I'd sum it up is unique but average. The show is about a kid who sits right next to the most popular girl in school, and he's basically just treated as an obstacle. And then he starts getting bullied for dropping his fucking eraser next to her and making her pick it up. Okay. And then also one of the guys bullying him was just straight up named Obama, so that's cool. But then he suddenly gets attacked by CGI rabbits and then saved by the popular girl, who turns out to be a witch that has magical powers. And it turns out that there are a ton of witches out there, and they all desire our main character's frosted flakes. The action was decent, I guess, but I was never sold on any of the characters. Seinen romance offers a lot of potential for exploring more adult romance that you can't really find anywhere else in the medium. This seinen romance is called Sing Yesterday for me, but if it were an isekai light novel, it would be called I'm the most dull, uninteresting, unremarkable main character in existence, but regardless, manic pixie dream women gravitate towards me because we need a self-insert identity-less romance show. The characters are supposed to be mature adults, but still feels like I'm watching high school kids. And the dialogue is so useless that I genuinely believe that they had a word count to reach in this show. If you want to watch any romance show on this list, let it not be this one. Defrag is about a band of delinquents who pull up to their new school thinking they'd make a name for themselves, but they get kidnapped and coerced into joining the video game creation club. So this anime is something I completely understand if someone found funny, but I suppose I'm just not a fan of this specific type of humor. Don't really have much to say about it. Denki Guy is about this group of friends that do slice of life things while working in a manga store. It was decently funny, but not funny enough to justify the fact that nothing happens and the characters weren't interesting to keep me around. How Clumsy You Are, Mr. Ueno is about a middle school science club, and the main girl and guy have this little romance for each other, and the romance is about middle schoolers with little nuance. So by default, I don't care. And then also this shit got shit jokes. Akabe's sailor uniform is about a girl who really wants to wear a sailor uniform. Yeah. This stands out compared to other slice of life because of the admittedly pretty good art. Otherwise, this is an idyllic anime that features this girl making friends at her new school. It's a chill show, but I really don't have much to say about it. So this anime is about a couple of guys that attend a high school that was built specifically for cultivating the martial arts, with aspirations of becoming the best fighters in the school. You know, watching this shit made me realize the potential of some anime. If the entire medium wasn't so dead set focused on writing in fucking high school. Like, if you don't see the problem by now, I've been watching all of these seinen in which the literal definition of the demographic is for adults, and half of these anime are still set in high school. But yeah, imagine the sheer potential of action shows if anime authors threw away their over fixation on 4 years of a person's life. We could have literally gotten an anime version of Kill Bill instead of this shit. Of course, a ton of shows on this list feature adults doing adult things, but it's seriously just dumb that an overwhelming majority of these don't feature adults. Oh yeah, by the way, this show sucks. Just watch any other action show. I'm serious. Hanebado follows the badminton club, whose head captain is a demented sore loser who lost really bad one time and now hates badminton as a sport, and makes the club insufferable for the rest of the members. And so instead of everybody hates Chris, we get everybody hates the head captain, for good reason. Like, how the fuck are you the head captain for a sport and you actively despise it? But this show is just your cookie cutter average sports anime with the head captain twist. Although I noticed that the writing in general for this show is kind of abysmal. The characters are all one-dimensional, and the antagonists all feel like generic comic book villains. Actually, wait, let me not insult comic book antagonists. And then the show also tries to lighten the blow with some contrived quote-unquote jokes, but they never hit at all. Kurokami is a show that tries to be deep but fails miserably. It asks a bunch of philosophical and ethical questions, then its solution is just fists, violence, and superpowers. But the show does have an interesting concept behind everything. So our main character is a guy who turned emo because everyone who's ever been around him dies. Jesus Christ, this is a tragic Twilight backstory. So this dude meets a kind-hearted, strong-willed fighter named Kuro, and it's revealed that this world isn't as it seemed. Apparently, everyone has multiple clones of them, so that whenever someone unexpectedly perishes, there'd be a safeguard clone to replace them. It's a stupid idea technically, but philosophically, it has a chance to present some profound themes. Like, coming upon this information will literally warp your perception of death as a concept. But none of these themes are ever addressed in this show in a meaningful way, and it turns out to basically just be a shonen beat 'em up show, which is fine. Clearly, I have nothing wrong with that, but my problem is that the show pretends to be something it's not. This show is about 7 Japanese high schools that engage in turf wars for complete dominance over Japan. It's supposed to be some bastardized tropey anime allegory for the warring states period of China, where several states battled for control over China in like 1,000 years ago or something. And the anime starts off by just explaining to the audience what the allegory is and how it relates to the show. The show kind of treats the audience like we're not very bright. The characters are supposed to be inspired by some historical figures during the warring states period. Yeah, so can someone please explain to me how high schoolers fighting each other and then every time someone lands a blow, a piece of their clothing flies off is supposed to be historically accurate? As porn, this is trash. As a modern rendition or interpretation of the warring states period, please respectfully fuck off. We'll get to Kingdom eventually, trust me, we'll get there. The Foolish Angel Dances with the Devil is about the near end of a war between heaven and hell, and hell, being on the losing side, sends out a scout to survey the mortal land to see if he can recruit any promising people to the army. Then he meets a girl who Wow, big twist, she's an angel. So this is a rom-com about this guy who's literally the ambassador of hell falling for an angel. The romance is fine, I guess, but the comedy fell flatter than the shit you'd see after being crushed by a hydraulic press. So this anime is about a specialized high school academy that was created to train kids to fight for justice due to worsening crime rates in Japan. So basically they're just in police training, but of course it has to be in high school. I guess it could have been an interesting show if the author focused more of his writing prowess on the plot instead of using all of his brain power to write inexplicable circumstances where the woman of the show would just be like half naked. This author refined the tsundere stutter more than the actual plot of the show. And the setting of that private high school with guns and shit just feels like a backdrop for telling a story about this high school dropout that somehow magically enchants every woman he sees with how aggressively ordinary he is. And then there's also some stinky CGI in the show. Please avoid this shit if you can. Clean Freak Aoyami is about a football prodigy who scored the game-winning goal in the international U16 game. So when he officially joins his high school team, everyone's surprised to see that he's aggressively germophobic. This show actually isn't a sports anime, it's more like a comedy, and in that aspect, it was just okay. It started out decently, but it got old really quick. This one's another vampire anime that's not horrendously awful, but not phenomenal either. So the show starts with some TV talk show where they're doing some scripted investigation on whether vampires exist. And then an actual vampire comes onto the set to prove vampires' existence. And then with her tremendous wealth and influence, she single-handedly pays off Japan's national debt. So she's given permission to establish her own vampire colony called the Bund. And this territory spans across just a random ass high school, and our main character who attends this high school at first doesn't like vampires, but secretly has repressed memories that he's actually a werewolf whose purpose in life is to serve the vampire queen. Are you confused? Well, so am I. That doesn't just sound like gibberish, this is gibberish. And genuinely, I was never sold on either the characters nor the world of this show. Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible is about a dude that maxed out on his stealth stat and regretted it. Think Kuroko from Kuroko no Basket. Our guy is just a dude who doesn't have much presence, although one girl actually does notice him and she teases him and shit. This show reminds me a lot of Don't Toy With Me Miss Nagatoro, but like without the fetishes and gooners. It's pretty wholesome, but rom-coms like these are a dime a dozen nowadays, and the comedy part of it was just alright to me. What did you answer when someone asked that one generic question that goes something like, if you had one superpower, what would it be? The generic answers would always be like flying or super speed, but mine was the ability to stop time. Not to do any freaky hentai plot shit. It's just that you could do some diabolical pranks with that shit. Like imagine an instantaneous wedgie. But Kokugo is about a dysfunctional family who are having problems with the members of their household either getting laid off or just being unemployed. But then suddenly two of the family members get kidnapped. Then as our protagonist tries to deliver the ransom money, her grandfather tells her that if she offers blood to a stone, she could stop time and then go into a world called stasis. Then as she's about to recover her brother and nephew from the kidnappers while time was frozen, it's revealed that the kidnappers can actually move in stasis too. And then this omnipotent being called the Herald appears, who is the overseer of the stasis world. And that was all one run-on sentence, and that's genuinely what this show felt like to me. Just one big run-on sentence. It feels like there were so many ideas stuffed into the show that kind of just imploded. Like what I described to all of you was the first episode. Genuinely in 20 minutes, it went from a hard luck story about an unfortunate family to a treacherous kidnapping to a mystery thriller trying to find out the nature of stasis, and then to the point where they're trying to beat the video game boss of this level. The execution felt poor beyond episode 1, and it's just not something I'd recommend. Het is a decently executed psychological thriller show about a group of people with the supernatural ability to dive into other people's psyches. And while for me, a concept like that is just kind of been there, done that with amazing movies such as Inception and Paprika, but this turned out to be a decently executed story, but a group of people that use these powers to basically conduct assassinations. Although nothing about this show really stuck out as being anything but average, to be honest. Its characters were alright, but they weren't expertly written or anything. And then the plot does kind of get wild in some places, but in the end, it was just kind of alright. So this one might be a hot take because I know a lot of people like it, but just to describe it, it's about Sakamoto. He's just a dude that's just really cool. If I were brain rotted, I'd say he majored in unspoken riz at Hogwarts, but obviously I've never been one to engage in the Gen Z diarrhea. But this show is an episodic comedy that technically has a different main character for every skit. The story isn't normally told through Sakamoto's perspective, but other people's, from self-proclaimed S-rank thugs to middle schoolers and high school girls. I found the concept by the first couple episodes to actually be pretty cool, but beyond the novelty of the show, I actually never found it to be too funny. So the only exception to my 50% enjoyment, 50% writing rule is actually comedies. It'll be more like 100% enjoyment for the most part, because if we judged comedies based on the writing and plot, then Nichijou would be the single worst narrative ever written. So if I don't find a comedy funny, you'll probably see it ranked pretty low. And that concludes the mid shit, while we start to talk about a major turning point in this video. The shows I've covered so far are some that I would never really recommend to anyone, unless they're trying to watch some so bad it's funny shit. But now we step onto uncharted territory. These are shows that I could genuinely see people really enjoying, but for me, I just thought they were alright. Monster Girl is to fetish the same way that a conservative politician is to gay sex. One naturally begets the other and nobody really questions it. But Interview with Monster Girls is here to dispel that association. It's about a world where being a demi-human, whether it be you're a vampire or succubus, is treated as a normal, socially acceptable thing. They're even given unique benefits, like if you're a vampire, their government gives you a pack of blood every month, which is pretty wild that this is what anime society's taxes are going to. What's next? Personally assigned fuckboys for every single succubus? So this anime is about this biology teacher that wants to write a paper about demis, but doesn't have any primary sources to his name. So he's trying to first locate some demis that are willing to talk and then conduct an interview with them so he can finally get started on writing his paper. This has the bones of a slice of life show, but I really fuck with the low fantasy world a lot. The characters are pretty cool too. One of the problems with slice of life for me is how repetitive they are. Like, who said that a slice of life can't have plot progression? Who said they need to stay in one place for 12 episodes and repeat the same gags? Well, Servant X Service has a pretty fresh take on the genre. It's about civil servants, which, if you don't know, a civil servant protects, educates, and provides assistance to fellow citizens, which is a job description so vague that it reminds me of, you know, whenever you ask someone working an IT job what they actually do at work, and then they give you like some multi-layered metaphysical explanation describing back-end, front-end software development and cloud data structures, when in practice, they're actually just doing Among Us tasks for 8 hours a day. Yeah, this description of a civil servant reminds me of that shit. But unlike coding jobs, these jobs are real. Basically, their jobs is just to deal with people and their issues, so the show never feels like it stays in the same place or gets monotonous, since it focuses on a job with such variety. The characters are pretty cool too. I'd give it a shot if you're big into slice of life. Shoujo is not a genre I'm very fond of. To me, there's 3 routes that a show in this genre could possibly take. First one is Sailor Moon, the second one is Edgy Sailor Moon, And then the third one is just like ultra creepy shit where high schoolers be dating like 30-year-olds. And this anime, Asobi Asobase, kinda gives off shoujo vibes for a perfectly logical and nuanced reason that is more than just that it stars girl characters, of course. But it is definitely a seinen. It's a comedy, but this time it's about an American. So automatically adds funny points because of the DEI. But actually this show doesn't even need that. It just naturally has funny bits and gags that'll appeal to anyone, I feel like. So this is a soccer anime that focuses on a star player from a local suburban team, but he wasn't able to carry them to victory every single game. Their luck ran out and they were knocked out in preliminaries. Although Ashito himself, who's the main character, gets recognized through these games and gets an offer to play at Tokyo, which is a major departure from anything he's ever experienced before. What I liked about Aoashi compared to other football series is how it highlights that you don't have to be the star striker or some intense ball hog for people to notice you. While let's say a Blue Lock, which admittedly I do like a fair bit, only really shows one side of the sport with strikers, where Aoashi focuses on the complete version of football with some great matches and enjoyable characters. Honestly, I prefer Blue Lock over this, but this is still not bad at all. All My Goddess is just like a sincere version of Konosuba. So this guy calls a number which happens to be the goddess hotline, and a goddess appears before him and asks him to make a wish. And then, being the alpha male that he is, he's like, live with me forever then. Just kidding, actually, I didn't really mean that. That's like the type of antics that a cringy 14-year-old who's texting girls would be up to. Like, you can't just take that shit back, bruh. And that reigns true in this anime. The goddess grants his wish, and now she's bound to him for life. This anime is pretty calm. The plot progression is there until we hit like the midpoint of the show and it starts being like an episodic slice of life. But until then, the development with romance is really not bad. I mean, when you compare it to other anime whose romantic progression is staked solely in how many times the protagonist fell on top of the girl, this anime is a masterpiece. But just talking about this show holistically, for me, it's just alright. Mason Ikoku is a fairly old, fairly slow-paced romance show about a guy who falls in love with the manager of his apartment. But as it turns out, the manager's husband died just 6 months ago, and therefore her heart is extremely out of reach for him. This is definitely a slow burn that I personally was not the biggest fan of, although this one is definitely a matter of personal preference. Do you mind an older art style and way of storytelling? Is slow-paced romance a buzzkill for you? If I asked you these two questions and you replied to both with yes, then this show just isn't for you. Straight up. So this show reminds me a lot of a classic detective show, but more modernized, with mysteries being unraveled and supernatural occurrences explained. It's a well-structured, well-paced story that's not too deep, and it focuses on being an entertaining show with fun characters. Main character is always obsessed with being viewed as this hard-boiled, old-school detective, but he's kind of a beta male. His partner has the computational skills of a quantum computer, and then this girl is just the glue that keeps the crew together. Nanan Biori is a slice of life with a very interesting presentation. It's about this girl that moves from Tokyo to the middle of bumfuck nowhere, and her new school consists of one classroom for every single grade in elementary school. When I started doing these videos where I had to watch like 40 million anime for each of them, the one genre that I'd always shit on indiscriminately was slice of life. And that kind of hasn't changed all too much. But after watching a lot of it, I think I came to understand its appeal a little more. What I think is the most important part of a slice of life are its vibes. And this show always takes time to focus on the nice scenery of the rural area and the quietness of the wildlife there. And then add that with a pretty good soundtrack and you get vibes. It's pretty simple. If you're into slice of life, this is for you. The characters are pretty enjoyable and it's like almost funny to me, but I could see how some people would laugh at this. But if you aren't into slice of life, I don't really see you enjoying this that much. Daimon is about the son of the owner of a sweets shop, and after hearing about how his dad is in poor health, he returns after years of being away with the intention of taking over the business. But as it turned out, his dad already named his successor, who is just this little girl that he adopted. At first, the relationship between the both of them is pretty hostile, since they're both fighting for the successor name. But eventually it becomes a pretty heartwarming story as they both learn to live with each other. It's a slice of life though, so I don't really have much to say. It's pretty chill. A Galaxy Next Door is about a shoujo artist who works grueling hours to learn a living and save up for his younger siblings' college after their father died. Then he ends up hiring this woman assistant to help with the workload. It ended up being a pretty cute romance with nothing mind-blowing going on. The characters are likable, but they don't really have much to them, if you know what I mean. So next up is Sweetness and Lightning, which is basically just a single dad simulator. It's a very cute, very chill watch, but it's also a show about the struggles of a dad coping with the recent loss of his wife and having to fill in 2 parental roles. Although I feel like in the moment with a lot of these scenes, the show basically just relies on the cuteness of the little girl to keep the audience's attention. Other than her, not many of the characters were very interesting to watch on screen to me, nor did they have memorable personalities. Rosen Maiden has a very unlikable shut-in main character who talks to his little sister like white people talk to their moms. Although flawed characters aren't bad characters, the plot really kicks in when he's engaged in his normal hobby of ordering random shit from Amazon and then returning them for a full refund. And then he gets this weird box with a doll in it. I seriously thought this shit was gonna turn into an episode of Goosebumps, but no, this is a death game. As it turns out, the doll is actually alive, and then these other goofy stuffed animals and dolls come to kill each other. It's a really silly premise that turns out to have some pretty decent execution. We get some needed development with the main character where he matures a little bit, and all the characters made this show a pretty enjoyable time. Maria Holic is about a conniving lesbian that slithers her way into an all-girls school to quote-unquote meet her special someone. But then the first girl that she tries to hit on turns out to be a cross-dressing dude. And then he blackmails her into keeping his secret. One thing that I noticed immediately with this show is how yappy every single character is. Like every second we're hearing some extended monologue from someone or some snappy, speedy dialogue between characters. It's like a light novel was adapted into a visual novel and then back into a light novel and then was created into this anime. I don't even hate it though, it keeps things interesting. This is a show that kept me entertained with its, well, interesting characters, but to me the show never exceeded just being okay. So that's why it's here. I'm not gonna lie, this one has the most diabolical premise on this list. So our main cast attend a high school where part of the curriculum is to live with a randomly assigned classmate of the opposite sex and play pretend married couple. I don't think I've seen a premise so ridden with plot holes. Oh wait, maybe plot holes isn't the right word. It's more like practical. This shit is the least practical plot I've ever witnessed. Imagine how this would just effortlessly tear previously established relationships apart. And for the people that are single, oh no. Imagine a cheerleader with a Reddit mod, or a football player living with a woman that would rather be alone with a bear in the forest than a man. Shit would be utter chaos, and it's kind of funny to think about, but if you're willing to suspend your disbelief for 12 episodes, this show is a pretty good time. It has an undeniably great adaptation with bright and colorful character designs and really good environments. To quickly explain the plot, guy likes girl, and then a separate girl likes guy, but then the guy and girl they each like gets coupled together. And then the guy and girl who have crushes on the other people get coupled together. It's a pretty entertaining drama romance show with cool characters and a batshit insane premise. Under Ninja makes you ask a lot of questions, like why are there CGI Americans with actually decent accents? Why are people dressed up like high school kids who are clearly not high school kids? And why is this guy calling these girls on the top of the other rooftop the enemy while referring to one of them as Frieza? Well, actually that last one is kind of easy to answer. But anyways, this anime is about modern day ninja who get an assignment to infiltrate a high school. It was over the top, goofy, and just weird sometimes. I was having a really good time watching this show at first, to be honest with you. But it was like one of those awkward moments where you're laughing with someone because you think they're trying to be funny, and then you realize they're being serious the entire time. Early on, I was almost 100% certain that this show was just a meme. But then later episodes had me question how self-aware this show actually is. It seems confused. Or maybe the writing is just so bad that serious moments end up being point and laugh caliber scenes. I really don't know with Under Ninja, although that doesn't take away any of the enjoyment I got from the show. My Home Hero is about a father who recently learned that his daughter was being abused by her Yakuza boyfriend. And through a little bit of digging, he finds out that his daughter will be going through much worse while this Yakuza jerk-off is still alive. So out of desperation, he kills him. But in the worst possible turn of events, the guy that he killed happened to be the son of the Yakuza boss. So he knows that he is not safe, that he cannot run because he will be chased to the ends of the earth, and he cannot hide because of how thorough the Yakuza are with finding people. Yet regardless, he runs and he hides and he tries to slip past detection. And you might be thinking to yourself right about now that this show seems pretty sick. And I agree with you, but the execution was kind of whack in some places. None of the characters make decisions that have any resemblance to normal reactions, and there are some moments where the show treats us like idiots.
I've only got one shot. A surprise attack. Reika has a message for you. Huh? She left you a little surprise. Take a look in the closet if you want.
So you're telling me that this guy is so stupid and also so deaf that he doesn't take into account that the dad is just in the closet? Well, I guess you could just chalk that up to him being dumb, but regardless, it had some major flaws in writing. Castle Town Dandelion is about a really big family with 11 members in total, and their extremely hectic lifestyles with so many siblings. At least that's what I thought it was about. Then it's revealed that the father is the king of the country they're living in, which makes all the children royalty. Okay, so it's going to be like a modern take on a royal family. Seems like the show could go in an interesting direction. And then, out of nowhere, the children all have superpowers now. This show keeps just casually adding genre-defining plot points as an afterthought. Next is gonna be like, oh yeah, by the way, they're actually reverse isekai incarnates who are just goblins disguised as humans. Like, why the fuck does this modern-looking Japan country have a monarchy? And why do they have superpowers? But it was ultimately a pretty enjoyable time. There's this royal election that's gonna happen to determine the next king or queen, and I'm just gonna totally disregard why they're having an election in a fucking monarchy, but the whole show is about the rivalry between the siblings to see who's gonna get the throne. It's trashy but undeniably fun. This show was made by the same guy that made Interspecies Reviewers. You remember that shit? And it makes me feel so dirty because I was actually enjoying myself a lot for this show. First of all, the art style. You could just look at it on screen. Genuinely 10 out of 10 from art standpoint. I really fuck with the style. But not just the art too. The animation and fight scenes are all a treat to look at because it's the slaves at Studio Mappa who are behind this anime. The premise also caught my eye too. It takes place in a world that was swarming with demons 800 years ago, and then God sent down his special ops to go down and take care of them. Those special ops are called who would stay on Earth and even make up their own race of people in the next 800 years of peacetime. Although after so many years without conflict, evil forces are trying to resurrect demons across the world. It's a banger premise with a banger adaptation, although what I have a problem with is the actual writing. I mean, did you actually expect to receive a good story from the guy whose biggest accomplishment in life is creating a monster girl fetish show? It presents sexual assault about as sophisticated as a hentai does, and I like a lot of the characters' personalities, but their reactions to situations just doesn't feel realistic at all. And I really don't like any of the villains or the main villain. Still an enjoyable show overall though. This show genuinely might be one of the most accurate depictions of ADHD I've ever seen. It's a fun little show to pass the time with. It's about Rumi, who sits in the back of the class with Seki, and all Rumi wants to do is pay attention to the lesson. But by the end of the episode, she always ends up getting swept up in whatever over-the-top antics Seki has gotten himself into. From a fully realized domino course to a fucking war with shogi pieces. Very entertaining, and I really like the art style. So this is about a girl who saved a puppy from drowning, and then the shrine goddess gives her some power as thanks. And it turns out that it's the ability to transform into anyone she pleases, and she thinks of using this power to pursue her crush. And although the theme may seem predictable, believe me, it is predictable. She uses her power only to end up regretting it, and then by the end of the show learns to accept and love herself for who she is. And yeah, the theme may have been predictable, but the ride there wasn't all too bad. The production was all around pretty amazing in the show, and the characters are charming. Giant killing is a genius new innovation in the medium of anime as we know it. It's a sports anime and the sports teams aren't high schools. And it seriously says something that a concept like this is what gets me hyped up. Giant Killing is about a struggling Japanese league team called the ETU that has been on a losing streak so bad and so soul-crushing that its own fans have been abandoning them. So in a fit of desperation, they hire this former Premier League Japanese player as the coach, and he has to work with this dysfunctional team with conflicting personalities. It's actually really cool to see a sports show from the perspective of the coach. I'm not gonna lie, I've always been kind of a hater of sports coaches. Like, why is the coach of the Chiefs a household name when it doesn't even look like he can run 100 meters, let alone walk it? But this anime gave me a whole new appreciation of how important coaches really are to a team. And this show is also just a really good classic underdog sports anime. And the coach uses the term giant killing whenever they take down a big team. I mean, come on, that's just metal. You exist, I exist. Humanity's existence is one of the most puzzling mysteries of our age. Thriving on a habitable planet has such a low probability of happening that many people use this as a means of proof of a god existing. And some of them pose convincing arguments pointing out at how complicated the systems of humans are and how they feel deliberately crafted. But there's also blobfish in the world, like genuinely a whole species of fish that look like this. And this is the type of shit that makes you wonder if God just started fucking around and finding out, or if he just got lazy at some point. Heaven's design team is about a squad that God assembled because thinking of new ideas to add to Earth became tedious, so now he's outsourcing it. It's a fun concept with just alright execution. It's a comedy, but the characters feel very subdued and not all too expressive. Most of the funny bits just came from how ludicrous the premise is. Young Jack Black is an anime about a surgeon, which is something that I've honestly never seen before since Monster. And even then, Monster isn't really about Tenma as a surgeon. So this show takes place in the 60s when apparently large waves of protests broke out in Tokyo University and also amongst the interns in hospitals. In the show, these strikers are framed as just greedy guys who just want more pay, but I guess we'll agree to disagree there. But our main protagonist couldn't give two shits about the protests. He's just a locked-in med student who's on his grind set. And this is a story about how he became a legend of a surgeon. It's clear that the characters know what they're talking about in this show. It's one of the things that frustrates me to no end, when authors think they could write about a certain topic when they've only seen like Hollywood movies about it. Like, no, this isn't what actual boxing looks like. Why did we allow this guy to write about it? But it actually turns out that the author of this anime was a doctor in real life. The problems I have with the show mainly come down to how it's episodic. I kind of facepalmed when I realized that, because this is the type of story that really needs plot progression on its side. But if you don't mind the reset after 20 minutes, it's a pretty decent medical drama. So MF Ghost was an anime not too long ago that was hyped up to be the spiritual successor to Initial D. And I feel the level of success that this show achieved can be quantified with the fact that when I saw this title, I honest to God thought that this was some niche pseudonym that MF Doom used to use. But no, it's not. It's about a racing league called MFG that still hosts gasoline-based cars at a time in the near future where the Elon Musk brain rot infected everyone worldwide and electric vehicles dominate the market. The story follows this half Asian, half British dude who enters into the MFG as a newcomer. And the car races are pretty cool, but I feel the need to compare this to Initial D, because I also just watched that for this video, so it's fresh on my mind. Initial D's racing feels raw, like there's real danger at every turn and drift, and that's what keeps you at the edge of your seat with suspense. It considered things like road condition, driver techniques, and sometimes even the mental endurance of driving. MF Ghost doesn't really consider all too much of that, and the protagonist is just kind of him by episode 1. He literally has zero flaws, and this show has a lot of fan service. And when I say that when referring to a show like this, what you might imagine is some sexy, detailed, oiled up Porsche or some futuristic looking glossy Lamborghini. But no, what I'm talking about is just normal fan service. It just detracts from the experience as a whole, and I wasn't really a fan of how the romance B-plot took up like 50% of the show's runtime. But even still, the racing is pretty cool. Genshiken is a show about college kids at Tokyo University who join an otaku club. And not only do they talk about anime, manga, cosplay, figurines, doujins, and conventions, the show also educates the audience on otaku culture in general. And I found it to be pretty fun to watch an anime about me, an anime fan. Although I'm not like hardcore emptying my bank for a nude season 4 Eren Yeager figurine, and I've only gone to a few conventions. Well, actually, I say that like it's more than one. I've been to Anime NYC a couple times, and my highlight was seeing Mark Phillips from RDC World, although I never got the chance to take a flick with him. But anyways, this anime is a fun time, but beware that it's more like a slice of life episodic show than anything. XXX Holic is a show that reminds me a lot of Mushishi, but it's about cases of ghosts, spirits, and just a very strange and supernatural world. Each episode tells its own thought out story, and each one tackles its own theme. One thing that I'll point out is its outdated art style. Me personally, I was never really a fan of the whole long, stretched out, exaggerated character designs that Code Geass started. Otherwise, I think this show offers a very introspective experience. It doesn't have any fight scenes or anything like that, but it makes up for it in great dialogue and storytelling. Skip and Loafer is a story that shares many similarities with like 1,000 other anime. And, well, Hallmark movies. Country girl moves to a big city and gets a lot of cultural whiplash, but is whisked away by some dreamy nice guy who pays for all her bills and makes her a trad wife. But this anime separates itself by just having likable, unstereotypical characters. They're all just normal people with their own issues and drama, and I like how our protagonist isn't some generically ordinary Joe Schmo. She's literally the valedictorian of her class, which makes her a very relatable character for me at least. I also think the drama of the show is executed very well, and it overall really handles that trope really well of the country girl moving to a big city. This is the one series I found really hard to write about, because it's one of the most dark, most fucked up, most brutal death game anime out there. I would put a disclaimer, but to be completely honest, there isn't any specific warning I'd give, since it checks off literally every single fucked up box. But let me explain the premise first. So Batum is a game in this world that is centered around PvP, but players outskill and outsmart enemies using bombs as their primary weapons. Then suddenly a select number of Batum players get sent off to a remote island and are forced to participate in a Batum themed death game where each player is equipped with a specific type of bomb. There's a lot of nuance to this show that I thought worked out quite well, like when it revealed why everyone got picked to participate in the death game. It was a great vehicle for character development, although I think Batum has a little bit of a problem. So I will give a specific disclaimer for what I'm about to talk about next, because I'm gonna reference a specific example. So the main heroine of the show is a victim of grapes. She really doesn't like grapes. I'm sorry, this is supposed to be serious, but I can't say the actual word because of YouTube. So we go through her extremely tragic and deplorable backstory, and yeah, we feel for her and everything. Although it kind of feels like the author, when thinking about this character concept, just thought of her as a grape victim and that's it. It's okay to have extremely tragic characters in your series, especially if it's one of the main ones, should be more than just their depressing backstory. I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but I'm just putting my 2 cents out there. Other than that, the show does a good job in portraying the state of human characters living in a world with no boundaries or rules. Although the show does often border between straight up unnecessarily edgy sometimes, and towards the end it gets a little predictable. Two scenarios. Scenario 1 is that you give horrible ingredients to Gordon Ramsay and tell him to cook you a meal. And then scenario 2 is where you give the finest ingredients to some personal chef you found on Craigslist. Whose dish would you think would turn out better? Personally, I'd say Gordon Ramsay's. The best ingredients in the hands of an incompetent chef will turn to disaster. A murder mystery time travel anime sounds sick, and Erased was sick for most of its duration. Satoru is a guy that always had the ability to turn back time to a point before catastrophe. But in his most recent encounter with tragedy, he time traveled before the event happened. But this time, several decades before it happened. He figures out that the tragic event might be connected to the mysterious murder of his classmate during childhood, and that it might be the reason he time traveled back so far in the past. So Satoru desperately tries to piece together clues as to what actually happened and who the murderer is for the entire show. The intrigue of the show comes from its intensely sinister mystery that poses the question of who in the world would ruthlessly kill an innocent girl. And it was incredibly fun to piece together clues as an audience member on the sidelines while watching Satoru's journey. But by around the halfway point, the show self-reports itself. It exposed just how stupid we, the audience, the creators, think we are. The narrative started getting about as subtle as Lil Nas X. It literally devolves to the point where Satoru is just like, okay, can you just raise your hand if you're the killer for me? That'd be very helpful. Okay, much obliged. So then when the mystery is eliminated for those who have brains bigger than this, what's left in this show? Well, the drama between the characters is one thing, and I do generally like most of the characters, so it wasn't even bad to sit through. It was just really frustrating how this show had so much raw potential just for the author to throw it all in the garbage. Okay, that ends this tier. But before we go on to the next one, what became very clear to me when thinking about how this video was going to be structured was that just watching anime wasn't going to cut it. It would be downright unfair, since it feels like Seinen has been cursed, since a lot of them have 10 out of 10 manga and then get rewarded with some diseased poop stank ass adaptation, Berserk being the most popular example. So I want to clarify that I read the manga of the show, but only if the adaptation was catastrophically worse than the manga. If the manga is only slightly better, then I'll just watch the anime. So keep this in mind as we dive into the good shit. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a flying grandpa. Inuyashiki is one of the most wild shows I've ever seen, with lines of dialogue that you probably would only believe it if you've seen it.
もう死んでるよ。頭打ったもん。
It's really an experience that is definitely not for everyone, but for those that can stomach the sheer gruesomeness of this show, there's definitely some good here. For reference, this phenomenal piece of art was made by the same guy that did Gantz, which is an acid trip that we'll get into soon enough. So Inuyashiki is about a dude that genuinely looks like an 8-year-old, but he's only 58. He leads a very pitiful day to day, with his kids not really caring about him and a stale marriage. And then abruptly, he finds out that he only has 3 months to live because he has cancer. This story is setting up for this character to be one we feel for on an emotional level. Then we cut to Hiro, who we know is in high school and likes One Piece. These are our two main characters that the show always cuts between, and it's quite a stark difference between how these two are characterized. But regardless, boom, an alien crash lands, then kills both of them, resulting in the aliens rebuilding their bodies as machines. So our resident grandpa uses his newfound abilities to help anyone he can, even curing people of terminal illnesses and saving victims of all sorts of fucked up shit. But on the other hand, Hiro decides that he wants to kill people for fun. Average One Piece fan, I guess? No, it doesn't even make sense. As he says himself, he cares about manga character deaths way more than actual people deaths. Oh, and by the way, if you've ever seen the Bong clip, this is where that shit comes from. The whole story is about putting good and evil on parallel roads, although their paths don't always remain separate. When they do cross paths, they know that they are faced with their complete opposite. It's a cool show with a neat concept, but like it's really fucked up. Like honestly bordering on edgy for a lot of its duration. This is a show I wanted so desperately to hate, so desperately to shit on, so desperately to burn until nothing was left but ash. But it was probably one of the most impressive ecchi series I've ever watched. And impressive because it manages to flaunt its obscenely frequent soft porn to the audience while also being a pretty great comedy and having likable characters. So Prison School is about an all-girls school who recently went co-ed, and a whopping 5 guys enrolled to the school out of 1,000 women. So this group of guys that I could only describe as the boys, day one peep on the girls' bathroom clad in skin-tight sneakers. You know, as you do. And they get caught and then shipped off to the prison school where they got no rights. I gotta admit that I honest to God haven't laughed so hard at an anime in a while. Bro, the soap scene, that shit had me dying. And then of course is that one iconic scene that everyone knows about, where these 5 goobers are sitting in a room with the principal of the school trying to argue against their expulsion. And then to determine whether they get fucking expelled from the school or not, the principal asks one question, with everything writing on their correct answer. Boobs or ass? And then every single one of the goon squad starts having their light Yagami overthinking ADHD scene. It's just peak humor. Although this show might be the definition of raunchy. All I'm saying is that if you're planning on watching this, make sure you put it on the biggest screen of your household possible, while also making sure you're inside the most populated open room. High Score Girl is about a kid who's no good at school, sports, or really anything productive, but all of that doesn't matter to him as long as he has the arcade. He's known around the arcade as the man and prides himself at being good at video games. That is, until a girl from his class, who always has perfect grades and has hella friends and all that, folds him like a beach chair in Street Fighter 2, with fucking Zangief of all characters. For comparison, for all you brain-rotted Gen Z zombies, beating someone with Zangief is like queuing up solo squads in a Fortnite lobby while only running the classic pistol the entire game and then actually winning. In Street Fighter 6, nothing sobers you up more than getting clipped by a Zangief player. It's like you might as well hop on Fall Guys at that point. But I really like what High School Girl has going for it. It does a really great job at explaining how arcade games were played back then, even down to the most niche strategies. This anime is one I definitely recommend for the nerds out there in the audience, if and only if you could tolerate what I've been trying to avoid talking about like a plague, which is the animation, the CGI, whatever the fuck they did to the characters to make them look like sentient Funko Pops. It's just not that great to look at, and honestly it'd be way higher if it wasn't objectively ugly. Bloodlad is about a vampire weeaboo who meets a Japanese high schooler and then completely throws away his life for her. So he's this badass territory leader of the demon realm, while in actuality he's a degenerate who fawns over humans in their culture. Honestly, my favorite part of this show is the art style and how the studio chose to color the demon realm. Then suddenly a human mysteriously appears inside the realm, and it's some Japanese girl. So Stas, who's the main character, absolutely geeks out on her and exposes himself as a dork. But then through his own incompetence, Stas just lets the girl fucking die and turn into a ghost. And then for the rest of the show, it's about him just trying to find a way to revive her. This show is a nice put it on in the background type of show to just chill to. Stas is a very fun protagonist, although the girl, who I honestly already forgot the name of, kind of has no personality. That was my only real criticism of the show. You're Being Summoned, Azazel really surprised me for what it is. It's about this private detective that secretly uses black magic and summons demons to do his work for him. It's not a special or even all too interesting concept in itself. I mean, this demon detective trope is honestly more common than I thought it would be, with the best example being Damien from Invincible. But this anime is a comedy, and
Shea Gilgeous-Alexander credit as Devontae sends it.
this shit hits. It's not only funny to see these stupid ass characters interact with each other, but also the way the anime is produced amplifies that stupidity tenfold. Like, why do those tits have recoil? I'm genuinely crying. Probably not for everyone though. Only watch it if you have my brain dead sense of humor. This show follows an inspector from Aka, which is a government that was put in place after a coup d'etat destroyed the previous authority of the country of Doha. Our main character is tasked with auditing the 13 states of a country in order to sniff out the faintest trace of malpractice. This show is a slow burn, deceptive story that is deeply political. Viewers will learn to understand that looks can be deceiving in this occupation, and characters will always have deeper agendas and will never wear their intentions on their sleeves. Paired with a great production and overall great adaptation, this anime is something that a lot of people wrote off in 2017 because it doesn't offer any instant gratification. But if you're willing to allow yourself to be immersed in the world, then this anime is for you. A lot of comedy anime is just like Call of Duty. There's no variety. It's always like, here's the same high school setting that you've seen 1,000 times, but this time it's a different club that the characters are in or some shit like that. And I'm not saying that these shows are automatically bad, a lot of them make it work in a big way. I'm just saying all this to express how Hozuki's cool-headedness was truly a breath of fresh air. It's set in hell, and in this world, hell is run like a bureaucracy, with the only reason that is running in good order being the perfectionist micromanager, Hozuki. The art is so unique, all the backgrounds look like sketched afterthoughts, and the animation itself is surprisingly fluid. I found this one pretty funny, but I also still find fart jokes funny in 2024, so I'm obviously not the authority on this subject. The Witch and the Beast immediately drew me into its Victorian low fantasy with one of the oddest main duos I've ever seen in anime. It's a significant twist on the classic good cop bad cop dynamic with the loud and perpetually pissed off Guidu, who reminds me a lot of Unosuke somehow, and Ashaf, a stylish mysterious mage who has like crow magic and shit. I really fuck with all the character designs in the show and they're all just so dripped out. But anyways, they're part of an organization whose main objective is to take in all the witches scattered across the world. And there are 17 witches in total, and the story has them traveling from place to place, uncovering mysteries and bitch slapping some witches. It's a heavily character driven show that's great when it comes to this show because the characters are the best part. This show has a very interesting story about a witch living during France's 1,000-year... Bro, I was about to say the 1,000-year blood war arc from Bleach. No, but no, this is the 100-year war with England. And as a naive girl who has to put up with fighting going on in her backyard and people she knows being dragged into the war, she usually ends up using her god-given magic powers to meddle in battles and use extreme measures to make sure everyone stops fighting. She views it as the just thing to do, but consistently, she's berated by older succubi and even angels that she's projecting her childishly simple solutions to a problem much more complex. complex. Yet she continues to meddle in battles anyways because she's stubborn. But as it turns out, her attempts at mediation have only drawn out the war further because in multiple cases, there had been decisive war-ending battles taking place only for her to meddle in it, leading to no decisive victory nor decisive ending to anything. This is, in my opinion, a really good medieval fantasy that explores the horrors of war and also the consequences for not understanding the horrors of war. This anime got buried in 2015 for no apparent reason, it seems like. The only thing I didn't like too much about it was the ending. Anime as a whole has been guilty for really romanticizing the shit out of school life and adolescence. Hell, if I offered to give some Mr. Beast type of money to a shonen author under the condition that they don't write their shows in high school, they wouldn't take that shit. But Insomniac's After School is a great show that is set in high school, but it doesn't paint this idyllic picture of how high school life is the best or anything like that. It centers around the struggles of adolescents who can't change their defects but learn to live with them regardless. And it also turns out to be a very cute romance story about two insomniacs who comfort each other through their disorder. Definitely one of the most heartwarming stories I found on this list. Wandering Sun is about the prettiest girl in class who ends up being a boy. I don't know what it is about seinen and gender benders are. Like, do they really think that this deserves to be in the same genre as Elf and Lead just because someone switched up their gender? Like, it's not even that much of a controversial issue anymore. It's been brought to the mainstream with celebrity trans women, like most recently Joe Biden. So seriously, anime like this that cover touchy subjects usually end up poorly researched and mishandled disasters, and in some cases can end up being straight up insulting. So with a more serious anime like this, there is a lot more opportunity for it to end up being a catastrophe, but luckily we live in the good timeline. The story follows Nitori, who always felt like a girl, and then Takatsuki, who hates wearing skirts and feels like a boy. Both of these youths feel strangled by societal norms and gender roles. This is a show about transgender issues with beautiful presentation. I mean, you've been seeing it on screen. These watercolor pastels that define the background and characters really make this show such a unique experience. You can tell that it has some pure passion behind it. Ultimately, the show tries to educate, but also pose a bunch of difficult questions to the audience, like what does it mean to be a boy or girl, or what is gender dysphoria, or why do people find trans people weird? And I think the show makes an honest effort to answer those questions. The kawaii complex might look like your ordinary rom-com that's somehow a seinen through inexplicable means, but honestly, the art direction and whole production team behind this shit deserves a sizable raise from their usual wage, which for animators back in 2014, their pay was probably just the privilege to see their kids or some shit. And by the way, I called this a masterpiece, but only as an animation. The perspective, the fluid motions, the radiance that shines throughout the entire show is a style I heavily fuck with. Talking about the show, I didn't really find the romance to be something I haven't seen a million times, but I actually did find this one to be pretty funny from time to time. All the characters were mad entertaining, and it was really just an enjoyable watch. House of Five Leaves is about a timid shy guy Ronin, and if you don't know, a Ronin is a wandering samurai who somehow lost their master. He gets hired as a bodyguard for this dude he just found on the streets, and then it turns out that guy is a member of a gang called the House of Five Leaves, and after a little bit, the Ronin ends up joining up and ends up meeting all the members. This is clearly a character-driven show with surprisingly little action. It's a lot of dialogue, talks of plans for a specific job, or just sneaking around and gathering intel. And it's not bad because I love all the characters. Jormungand is a nuts to butts action anime with arms dealers, criminal organizations, and assassins. If you just want a mindless action show to just turn your brain off with, watch this. This anime has everything. Although if you're looking for anything more than action, maybe I'd turn and look towards something else on this list. Because while the characters are unique and interesting in their own way, it's always just really hard to root for them at all. Because usually when shows are told through the perspective of law-breaking misfits, a lot of the times their actions are framed as something that could be totally justifiable. But in this show, they're trying to frame it that way, but there's also an elephant in the room that I just couldn't get off my mind the entire time while watching this. These people are all doing this shady business and engaging in potentially fatal encounters with a child soldier. They're knowingly putting him at risk and working with him like it's nothing. As a child tasked with being a bodyguard to an arms dealer, Jonah is numb to all the bloody shit. But the adults he's working for, I guess, just become numb to working with an actual child. It's really kinda indefensible and ruins a lot of the show to me. This show is simply about a girl with a passion for animation. Think Bakuman, but instead of drawing manga, they're really into anime. And while we're on track of comparing this to Bakuman, compared to its very pragmatic approach to conveying Akito and Moritaka's journey through learning manga, this anime has a very frantic, wacky, creative energy that is just distilled through every frame. The characters explore and learn about animation through literally exploring their animations. Concept art is more about the setup for the anime in the world in general. So Midori improves upon her concept art by immersing herself in her own fictional world and examining every detail. This is clearly a passion project for animation as a medium, and as I later found out, the director of this show might be one of the most fit men to handle a show like this, Masaki Yuasa. If you don't know him by name, then you definitely know him from his anime. This show was really just great, from a guy who really appreciates this stuff. Space Brothers is about two brothers who one day spot a UFO, and then both of them vow to become astronauts one day to prove that what they saw was real. The younger brother vows to go on the moon, and the older brother one-ups him and declares he's going to step on Mars. In an ironic twist, the younger brother was the one to actually make it as the astronaut, and then the older one turns out to be an unemployed bum. I really like the structure of Space Brothers, how it cut from present to the past to seamlessly give background and context for a lot of things. And then also it really surprised me just how much the authors seem to know about space travel and the specific things that astronauts do. And as it turns out, JAXA actually helped out in a significant way with the production of the series. And JAXA stands for the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, which is basically just Japanese NASA. So if you want a slow burn story about two brothers with big dreams, this show is for you. This show is about a talking anointed lizard that shows up to the main character's bed and tells him he gotta save the world or else some magician is gonna use his ultimate weapon called the Biscuit Hammer. Obviously our main guy thinks he's hallucinating until whoa, Genshin Impact player? Then he gets saved by some 16-year-old and then he pledges his loyalty to her and calls her his princess. This guy is a college student, by the way. So what makes this plot actually interesting is that the girl actually vows to destroy Earth herself, and they'll have to oppose this omniscient magician dude and also 11 other knights that were given power to save the world. It's a pretty intriguing premise that the anime handles, well, about as well as a cat would handle its litter box. It shits all over it. The manga handles it better. It separates itself from all the other save the world generic stories we've seen 1,000 times. All the characters are their own people who just happen to get roped into this larger than life battle for Earth's survival. The fights are really cool too if you're tired of generic battle shonen shit. And overall, it's a whimsical journey that's a really fun read, at least what I've seen so far. The Fable is about a cold-hearted, merciless hitman who kills without a second's thought, but he also shits himself watching like the Japanese equivalent of Jake Paul on the car ride back just after committing mass murder. He's an interesting dude to say the least, and his fame has reached such a level where he's known as the Fable in the underworld. So due to his fame, his boss wants him to lay low for a year under some Yakuza branch, but some of those Yakuza members see him as a threat and do whatever they can to indirectly drive him out. This show is here to serve. It's serving up some gourmet action with a side of badass and an entree of exquisite, genuinely funny bits. I mean, there's not much else to say. The anime does a pretty okay job, honestly, but the manga is way better. I read some of it a while back. Alright, listen. I'm not really a fan of the whole creepy twin stereotypes that shitty horror movie started, and that's because I'm a twin. And I'll tell you right now that all twins aren't these succinct, single unit creepers that talk in unison and only exist to be a side gag in sitcoms. My brother accomplishes that on his own, he don't need me for that. So all of that is to say that when I found that this show is about a couple that adopts a creepy pair of twins, I was immediately turned off. Oh, this ended up being one of the most unique shows on this list, to say the least. So I should probably clarify that the couple are under the impression that they only adopted one boy, but through some absolute fucking absurd shenanigans and twin antics, only one of them is in sight at a time. At first, my impression was that this was going to be some psychological thriller, because to be perfectly honest, these creepy motherfuckers act exactly like Johan from Monster, only if he had a clone brother. And then also, there are some clues and undertones throughout the beginning that hinted that their antics are calculated measures for them to get towards some nefarious goal. But then I see this shit. So for context, one of the twins is kinda starving since he had to hide out of sight from the family the entire time. So come dinner time, he waits for the perfect moment and slithers under the dinner table. And then they just trade positions, looking like they're doing some Simone Biles routine. At this point, I was laughing my ass off and 1000% convinced that this had to be a comedy. And believe it or not, this was made by the same author that did Sakamoto. And even though I wasn't the biggest fan of Sakamoto, I'm a fan of this. Mostly because I straight up just find it funnier, but also there's an actual plot. You might be laughing, but these twins are dead serious on their objective of vengeance. Basilisk is basically just incest Naruto, but if the six paths of pain wanted the main characters to bang so that he could revive the long dead Nobunaga. Oh wait a second. That was actually the sequel. Yeah, I'm not even gonna lie, I started Basilisk with the sequel, which was considered to be, well, just look at the score. But the original Basilisk is genuinely if Naruto had a bloody Romeo and Juliet subplot with a seinen spin to it. And this time, that comparison to Naruto isn't meant to insult the show. Basilisk features some amazing creative fights with all different types of ninjutsu and powers on the table. The anime in overall production somehow looks like 15 times better than its reboot that came out almost 15 years later. And the plot is simple yet so fun. So there are these two ninja clans, the Koga and Ika clans, that have been at each other's throats for like their entire history. Although recently a peace treaty was signed between them, and the heirs to each clan actually ended up marrying each other. But their love begins to be trampled on when two men disputed the right to become the shogunate, and they both ended up commanding 10 of the best shinobi from each clan to pick a side and fight in a battle royale. And whoever's clan wins gains the favor of the shogunate for the next 1,000 years. So the plot put these two heirs in a very difficult position where they had to choose between their love and their loyalty to their clan. Every episode we see something go down, whether it be some intense action or some freaky shit, or just some hella frequent deaths. And it's not like the cartoonishly silly predictable shit they pull in like Akemi ga Kill or some shit. The deaths actively made me more on edge for what might happen in the next episode. Ping Pong the animation is about ping pong, and the way I always looked at this show is the same way I looked at weed. Weed is a drug that is attractive to a lot of people, so much so that people who don't do drugs do weed. Weed is a gateway drug, and so is Ping Pong the animation. I see innocent young souls. Some are Naruto fans, some like Dragon Ball, but then they watch Ping Pong the animation and they undergo this irreversible transformation that cannot be undone. They're unable to consume anything that has more than 10 people talking about it online, shonen being out of the question, of course. And their taste becomes so obscure that we typically see these subjects regress into either the Fate fanbase or the Monogatari community. This anime is a slippery slope to becoming an anime elitist. But talking about the actual anime, I've always been reluctant to get into it because just how it looks. And don't get me wrong, the animation is clearly on another level, but animation and art style are two very different things. This guy looks like he got his head stuck in a hydraulic press. This guy looks like Jay-Z with that one hairstyle he had that one time. And then this kid looks like if a frog had a bowl cut. But then, once you get past that goofy art style, there is a lot to love about this show. It was clear to me from the start that the show was very unorthodox. Everything down to its writing, to the rotoscope flipbook style of animation, and even down to the sport they're playing. Like, when's the last time you've watched an anime on ping pong? But it managed to keep my attention the whole way through, with the show making me appreciate the sport so much more and made me realize that there's a lot to it. It even made me look back to the Olympics a few months ago and rewatch a couple of the matches. I find it funny that like all the upper bracket recordings is just China versus China, China versus Japan, Japan versus Japan. But yeah, ping pong is just great sports anime, where you could really tell that the production team are just passionate about the sport on a professional level. Learning about all the mind games and strategies that go into the game will never get boring. Oh, and also, will anyone tell me what the fuck the difference between ping pong and table tennis is? Okay, I actually looked it up because I was so curious. This shit is literally like the difference between a crocodile and an alligator. Shit's so stupid, bruh. Zom 100 is about a Japanese office worker during a zombie apocalypse, and given his circumstances, of course he's fucking gleeful. Bro works like 20 hours unpaid overtime. Like if I were doing that shit, I'd pray to God that some shit like this would happen. But we get a pretty depressing view of Akira's experience working for shitty corporate Japan. I mean, we've all heard that is bad, but when it's put into the perspective of Akira, and we see that his boss is a bona fide ugly bastard, and they literally go to sleep in the office in sleeping bags, it's shocking. But then the zombie apocalypse happens and everyone gets turned into zombies. So this show turns out to be about Akira going through a bucket list that he made for himself to do before he dies. But it turns out he's doing it in the zombie apocalypse. The show has a great selling point. It was just a really fun watch when I was catching it every Saturday. Although other than that, the show really doesn't have much more substance. It had a great production and I adored every single stylistic decision the production made. Although it doesn't hit as hard as some of the shows further up that we'll get to. Arakawa Under the Bridge has one of the goofiest premises I've ever seen, but it has some surprisingly great execution. So this guy, Ko, is the heir of some huge corporation, and he's always lived by his father's teachings to never owe anyone anything. But then he ends up getting his life saved by some girl, and suddenly he owes his entire life to someone. So he offers everything from wealth, assets, to real estate to her, but she doesn't budge. And wait, she's actually an alien from Venus? And wait, she actually just lives under this bridge? And wait, there's an entire community of weirdos that live under here too? This shit just gets weirder and weirder. And this Nepo baby now has to learn how to live under this bridge and coexist with everyone to pay off his debt. Yeah, this shit is weird, but as you might have already been able to tell from the clips I've already been putting on the screen, this animation style is Studio Shaft. And just production wise, this is artistically one of the best looking in their whole catalog. I just love every single thing to ever be put out from this studio. They have such a unique process when it comes to creating anime. They're truly never afraid to take risks with their psychedelic, sometimes lightning quick-paced narratives. The show has a presentation that I can only describe if you were currently getting a lobotomy. And the fact that this was animated by Shaft only amplifies the show's weirdness. And I know it sounds like I'm shitting on the show, but honestly to me, as someone who naturally just watches so much anime, weird or just out of the ordinary is one of the best compliments I could give. Hina Matsuri is about a psychic girl who uses her power to hold some random Yakuza member's expensive decor hostage so he'll let her stay in his apartment. I've never actually heard of this anime at all before this video, and I didn't really have any expectations going into it, but it turned out to be really funny and really wholesome. And I think it's honestly the funniest thing in the universe that this Yakuza guy in the English dub has this like New York Italian mobster accent. Unironically watch this shit in dub, it's so fucking funny. So this show centers around Nita, the Yakuza guy who learns to live together with and care for this unexplainable psychic girl who just randomly spawns in his apartment. And it's very wholesome 100 when we see Nita really learn to care for her and develop into a father figure. Otherwise, this shit is just fucking hilarious, and it feels like the show doesn't even have to try to be funny. Just let this guy be on screen talking like an authentic Tony Soprano for more than 5 seconds and I'll be dead on the floor laughing. Of all genres, comedy is the one where the plot and premise is actively the least important aspect of the show. But Grand Blue's innovation and sheer ingenuity with its premise really separates it from so many other anime in general. Because this anime is about college students. Yeah, I know you just audibly gasped. But believe me, I was flabbergasted too. So this anime is a very relatable show as a fellow campus dweller, and what the fuck, holy shit, he's literally me. So this anime is correctly classified as a seinen, but for way different reasons than other shows are. It's not like, whoa, there's gore in this show. No, it's just the fact that younger audiences wouldn't understand like half of these jokes. Like when the main character is out partying and he's passed a cup of what he believes to be water, then only after chugging it down, he realizes that it's flammable. Shit's funny as fuck, and it's not like I'm even gatekeeping the show. I just doubt you'd appreciate it if you're under the age of 16. But also if you've never experienced college life before. Otherwise, I absolutely love the themes this show tackles. It's not like revolutionary or anything, but I love how the main character's journey through getting into diving and everything parallels with his willingness to get out of his comfort zone, which is really what college is all about. Well, and mountains of debt. Gangsta is if Batman was a mute katana-wielding badass who gangbusts in Gotham City. Okay, that description is a little bit deceptive, but some parts of it are true. Like the city of Urgastalum is basically just Gotham City, although the mute katana-wielding badass isn't actually the main character. It's this guy who likes dark-skinned women. But this show is about Warwick and Nicholas, who are tags, which are basically mercenaries who take on jobs that no one else could handle. I really love the opening episodes of Gangsta, how the city is developed. It feels alive and infinitely vast, and the characters, especially the main two, I thought were great. But towards the end of the show, I felt like the plot started losing focus. So many characters got introduced that we were never really given a reason to care for. Maybe it's because it tried to cram too much content from the manga in the show, but I don't know. Maybe I should read the manga. It's not like the anime was dog shit, I'm just saying that it didn't maintain a consistent level of quality. One Out is a gambling sports anime, and it's not sponsored by FanDuels or anything. Hear me out. It's about a gambler named Toa who makes a name for himself playing basically the gambler's version of baseball, where it'd basically be a 1v1 against the pitcher and the batter, and he'd wager bands on top of bands that he will strike the batter out. Then this big shot Japanese baseball player pulls up due to some circumstances, and then Toa absolutely disciplines him. So after getting criminally violated from this random nobody, Kojima, who's that pro baseball player, seeks out Toa again and coerces him to join his team, believing that Toa is the missing link that they need. And to convince Toa, they settled on a contract that would add $50,000 to his salary for every single out he gets through his pitches. But on the flip side, he'd lose $500,000 if he missed one. I absolutely love the setup for this show. For obvious reasons, I'm at the edge of my seat every time they're in a game. I love all the characters except for this woman. Like, are you actually serious? We get the first canon black woman in anime and she looks like one of those CGI germs from those cleaning commercials. That shit's just disappointing. As someone who's never understood and would actively avoid the entire slice of life genre, March Comes In Like a Lion was like a raid boss to me, but ended up being a pretty enjoyable watch, mostly because of Shaft's absolutely godly art in this show. I don't even know how to exactly describe it, but the art style is so unique and the backgrounds are always so cool to look at. The only qualm I have with the production is how they draw the mouths. Like, I genuinely thought that this shit was a mustache, and you're telling me he eats with that shit? So March Comes In Like a Lion is about a professional shogi player prodigy who has a tragic backstory, which is really not all that different from any other seinen show, although I've really enjoyed how they explored his past. And don't worry if you don't know anything about shogi, because what this show is really about, in my opinion, is trying to find yourself in the present while also simultaneously coming to terms with your past. So there's this, combined with the really fun and silly characters that make for an anime that I'd absolutely recommend if you're into slice of life, but also if you want to vibe to a show. When was the first time you saw something and you couldn't physically find any adjective to describe it other than just cool? Hellsing Ultimate was that show for me. It's a thrilling show, but I hope you're not a virgin watching this because it's got vampires, ghouls, and ghosts. And probably the most scary thing out of all of them, British people. Hellsing is an organization directly under the British government to eradicate any satanic threats against their holy empire. And Hellsing fights fire with vampires of their own who activated friendly fire, like Alucard. I don't even have much to say about Alucard. He has a sick design, a sick way of fighting, and just every scene he's in, I love him. And then one day Alucard is out vampire hunting and he finds him. Just one problem though. He has a hostage. And remember when I said with absolutely no context, I hope you're not a virgin watching this?
I'm asking if you're a virgin.
You bastard! Answer me!
Yes, I am!
He turns this poor police girl into a vampire, which basically forces her into the Hellsing organization. To be completely honest, the only substantial critique I have of this show is that I feel like Ceres, who is that police girl, kinda has no personality. And also I feel like there's not a lot of character development in general, except for some snippets of Alucard's backstory we see. Although there's so much to love in this show, they actually made vampires cool for once. We got the Gendo Akari, head of the organization, and we got lore accurate priests. Everything just clicks with me with Hellsing. Dungeon Meshi, or Delicious Dungeon, lives an isolated existence. In a world filled with disposable power fantasy waste, this anime is the standout. Although the story lives in this medieval swords and sorcery world, the plot takes us in a completely different direction. Our main crew are drawn into this endless cavernous maze called, well, the dungeon. But they don't have any food to travel with. But then in the moment they needed him the most, they meet my goat, who is a little dwarf guy who cooks meals in the dungeon out of monster ingredients for fun. So Dungeon Meshi is about this party of adventurers that learn how to love eating monsters or risk starving to death while trying to accomplish their goal. It's really interesting to see them learn about this alien cuisine, which actually coincidentally shares a lot of qualities with real world food. If you invested a lot into the cooking skill tree, this show will have you pointing at real life ingredients and meal references like cameos in a Marvel movie. It's a really fun show that honestly has really thought out food mechanics in dungeon lore. Heavenly Delusions was a show that was coming out right under my nose. It was only last year during spring, and for 12 long weeks while existing in the anime community, I did not hear so much as an utterance of this show. Only until after it started airing, I think, did people really start to notice its quality. I think it might be because the show is simply just best enjoyed as a binge, because it focuses on two completely separate perspectives throughout its runtime. In one of them, we see a duo of a guy and girl team up in this post-apocalyptic world filled with man-eating monsters in order to find a place that they call heaven. You might say that they have a heavenly delusion, if you know what I mean. But on the other side of the world, we follow institutionalized children that seem to be living calm, peaceful lives, which obviously contrasts with the absolute chaos happening elsewhere. But this setting that the story spent about half of its time on had an atmosphere that always felt off. The only way I could describe it is that it seemed a lot like Promised Netherland. Of course, I won't spoil anything, but I love the vibe of this place. And then elsewhere in the other setting is where this show truly separates itself with a great duo with amazing chemistry and likable personalities. And then we also get some meaningful world building, which then in turn makes us look back at events that have happened in the other setting and makes us ask questions and think more. I think this show is incredibly well planned out with a great concept and executes greatly on it. Akagi at first reminded me a lot of Kaiji, but as I got further into the show, I realized that they're nothing alike. The real reason I saw such an immediate resemblance was because of the strikingly similar art styles, which makes sense given that Studio Madhouse were behind both anime. So this show is about a guy who's been down on his luck, whether it be on gambling or stocks. But it got so bad that he resorted to betting his life on a game of mahjong against the Yakuza. But even in this game, with all the stakes in the world, he's kinda eating shit. But this boy barges in, whose name is, you guessed it, Akagi. Thinking that the boy could change the tide of the game, the guy straight up just lets Akagi play while he's explaining the rules of mahjong to him. But long story short, he turns out to be the Magnus Carlsen of mahjong. And it's hella fun to see how he weaponizes seemingly unrelated situations and people to his game. This show is just very intelligent. Like, no matter how smart you think you are, this show is smarter. Although one qualm I have about the show is that I feel like it never really explained the rules of mahjong all too well. It's a complex game that's a lot like poker, where there's a ton of possible hands, and without knowing knowledge of those hands, I feel like a lot of the show's excitement is taken away. Bartender was something I really wasn't expecting to enjoy so much. It's just about a bartender who's really good at his job, and that's what this show is. But I never knew bartending was that deep, to put it plainly. I'm definitely showing my age in this section, but it was honestly so captivating, learning about all the intricacies of the job, from measuring viscosities to literally carving out ice with a pike. I'm not a miner, but I've also never been to a bar, so when someone in this show said, "Let me get a grasshopper," I realized that I was entering into another world. Bartender is truly an enjoyable show if you're old enough to appreciate it. The characters are all just chill people, just living their lives. If you don't know much about bartending or bar culture, it's also very educational. Shigarui is an incredibly bleak, gritty samurai anime that will have you rethinking everything you thought you knew about the Edo period in samurai. During that time period, life was not respected. It was something that someone owned, usually the shogunate. Women were treated as objects, and Japan was a very brutal place to live in. Listen, I sat through Elfen Lied, yet I still gagged several times just by how disgusting and detailed some gore shit in this show is. I'm not gonna lie, I think they went a little bit overboard, but I definitely wouldn't call it edgy because it's a necessary component to the tone of this show, and establishing this period as a ruthless, unforgiving time where death could be around any corner. The way this anime depicts samurai fights is so hyper-realistic. Fights are over in the blink of an eye, and characters die unexpectedly and in horrific manners. This anime is about a shogunate who's gone batshit insane, and he's decreed that a tournament happen between the samurai of his court and have them use real blades. And the storytelling within this tournament is extremely obtuse, with a fight happening then suddenly cutting to a flashback that lasts multiple episodes. It's definitely not for everyone, but what I really appreciated was the entire production of the show. And since I really find it hard to put into words, just imagine a samurai anime that's produced like Serial Experiments Lane. It's seriously one of the most experimental productions I've seen in a while. Although a problem I had with the show is how serious everything had to be. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for the ultra serious shows that explore deep themes, but even Evangelion has comedic relief moments, if you know what I mean. Shadow's house basically takes place in real life, except if black people were the ones who possessed white people to gain immortality. This story takes place in a place called Shadow's house, where this noble family resides who are all special in the fact that their physical bodies are pitch black from head to toe, and they even emit soot, which causes their surroundings to always get extremely dirty. Dolls are created and given consciousness for the purpose of giving these shadows faces and cleaning up around the place. And Emilio is a young and naive doll who would do anything for her shadow, although she still doesn't know next to anything about her master or what shadows are or even what the shadow house is. This is the type of show I love, where we're just dropped into an extremely strange world with no exposition dumps nor clues as to what's going on, and it's up to the characters or you in the audience to piece things together in order to see the bigger picture. The only other show that scratches that itch in the same way in this list is Land of the Lustrous, which we'll just have to wait for. I think Shadow's house almost kind of fumbled towards the end, which felt a little bit rushed, but that doesn't just disqualify what I thought to be a very good first 10 episodes. I have a bone to pick with this next one. So I'm reading a book. It's called No Longer Human, which if you're cultured, you probably recognize it because it's the second best-selling piece of literature in the history of Japan. So I mentioned the book and talk about the tragic and admittedly depressing story of the author's life, Osamu Dazai. And then once I utter that name out loud, everyone's just like, oh shit, Dazai from Bungo Stray Dogs, right? Bungo Stray Dogs reference, right? Wait, when did he start talking about Bungo Stray Dogs? Or actually, I guess now it'd be fucking No Longer Allowed in Another World, which is where Osamu Dazai gets fucking isekai'd. Bro, is this the Matrix, bro? This can't be real. There's no way. So this show and the people that watch it were always a little bit annoying to me, but I actually ended up really liking the show. It's about this orphaned kid who got kicked out, so he literally doesn't have any food or shelter. But he finds Osamu Dazai trying to, you guessed it, roadblocks himself in a river. Then they meet up and he explains that he's a private investigator that handles supernatural cases. And through a certain set of circumstances, our main character gets recruited into a private investigator unit. I could see why people fawn over this show. Everyone in the main cast, including the main character, are named after authors. And a lot of them, from my understanding, mimic the perceived personalities of these authors. So I definitely see the mass appeal from learning about all the Easter eggs of this show. But I also think that the characters are all extremely likable. Show has some nice personality to it, and it also doesn't shy away from some serious themes. I'll admit it, I've been converted. I now get this show. Rainbow reminded me a lot of Gurren Lagann. So if you don't know, Rainbow is a show that takes place in the early 50s, and it focuses on the criminalized youths of Japan after the war, and we walk with them through their journey being institutionalized. From graphic humiliation to shatter their pride, to brutal beatings from the guards that make their powerlessness sink in. It's a tragic, dark, saddening tale of kids who are criminals, but they were really the victims the entire time. And then we got Gurren Lagann, which is this colorful, fast-paced epic about an underworld mole kid who teams up with this bro who pilots their mechas while dreaming of reaching the top of the world. Oh, it seems like this comparison might be a little hard to explain than I initially thought. Okay, let me start over. I think the resemblance I found in both of these shows is how it features characters who are put down in the lowest possible standing, who through the power of bros and camaraderie dream to make it out of the trenches. It really is, and trust me, I really tried my hardest to avoid saying this in this situation, but it really is the most profound and grand expression of the power of friendship. Rainbow is dark, it's grim, I'm not gonna lie to you, but it's so cool to see these characters look out for each other and come together to claw their way out of the system. Ajin is a show about demi-humans who have the power to basically manifest a JoJo stand that are sometimes referred as blackies. Yeah. So I'm aware this series received a decently popular anime, but I've heard from multiple sources that the anime diverges from the manga in a significant way early on, and that generally people enjoy the manga way more, and that's what I read. Ajin starts out pretty unique. I actually really enjoyed the main character. I think so many anime nowadays always feel the need to fall into place by writing it from the perspective of some completely average typical protagonist. But Kei is a genius who wants to become a doctor, but suddenly he finds out that he's not human because he possesses the main identifying trait that a demi-human has, which is the ability to come back from death. But in Ajin's world, demis aren't treated like people. It's so bad bad, in fact, that immediately after hearing the news, his own family started referring to Kay as an it. The only reason Kay was able to escape capture was because of his sharp mind to think in the moment, and also his only support he has left, which is his friend Kaido. You could call this manga a lot of things. It's definitely a horror thriller type of series with a psychological aspect to it, but I think the core of this show is the theme of dehumanization. Everyone in human society sees Kay as an alien creature that they could use to their own advantage. No interaction with a human after Kay was exposed contained an ounce of empathy. They look at him like an animal, and even when Kay meets up with other demi-humans, he comes to the depressing realization that he's leading an isolated existence in biology and mentality. I think this can be a very introspective read for a lot of people, and I love the paneling work and just art in general. Everything flows so well, and I also love how every single character is written. It feels like everyone is just their own individual, not trying to live up to some archetype or any of that nonsense. So give Ajin a shot, even if it's the anime. I've only heard good things about it.
Don't be stupid. This is way more entertaining than Hollywood's ever gonna be.
Wow. Have I never agreed more with the line of dialogue in an anime? Black Lagoon is the type of show to make The Rock look like some diaper-wearing snowflake who always orders the estrogen entree with a side of french fries at his local Weenie Hut Jr. It puts hair on your chest, and it seriously feels like your stereotypical Hollywood action movie, but just better. And that feels weird to say out loud, but what I mean by that was just that, to me, when I was watching, it didn't really feel like I was watching an anime. Probably just because there's black people in this show, which is another positive I'll gladly point out. Dutch is more of a man than any of us will ever be. Rock, or Rokuro, is an incredibly fun protagonist. Ravi has a sick character design and is always a joy to see on screen. And then Benny is just Benny. That's all he needs to be. So Black Lagoon is about Rock, who is this dull Japanese corporate office worker who I suppose works for fucking Wells Fargo because his company just lets him die. But anyways, they kind of fuck Rock over and end up leaving him stranded in the middle of the ocean as a hostage for a mercenary group. But then Rock, realizing that his company literally does not give a single fuck about him after refusing to pay his ransom, puts up the middle finger to the suits like the ultimate alpha that he is, and officially becomes a member of the mercenaries. One neutral observation I made while watching is that it seems very fast-paced. Scenes cut to the next without wasting any time. Character dialogue doesn't overstay its welcome, and characters will move from place to place without a moment's rest. And I say that's definitely a good thing, because to me it didn't seem like it sacrificed much in keeping that pace up. And it's perfect for people today in the brain rot era. I'd also say that the show aged incredibly well. I'd highly recommend it now. I think you should give it a shot. Two concerns I had about Initial D before even watching it. One is that I've seen clips of it here and there, and it's always these ugly ass unrendered PS3 video game cutscene CGI car races. Then number two is that I'm not exactly a car guy myself, nor do I care much about racing. I was afraid that I might just not be the target audience for this show, because to me, if it has four wheels and gets me from point A to point B, then that's more than enough for me. And that is a direct quote taken from our main character. Much to my surprise, Takumi, who is our main character, doesn't give a shit about cars either, just like me. So we're given a proper introduction into speed racing from a guy who doesn't really care for any of it initially. Initial D is just so damn fun to watch. It has one of the most iconic soundtracks in anime. The races are hype as fuck, and shockingly the CG never ruined it for me. It's something that you kinda just get used to as you watch more and more of it. But I can definitely understand the complaints about it. I initially thought the show was gonna follow the typical sports anime formula, but Initial D feels so authentic. The real impalpable risk of crashing always keeps us at the edge of our seats when watching these car races. Like, this show isn't only about racing, it's also about the racers with this show, simultaneously pulling off some crazy hype moments, but also pulls off some great romance and comedy. So that was a huge section. I hope you stayed with me during all of that, because now we're off to the extremely exclusive last two tiers. And I don't even have anything else to say. Let's just jump into the greats. I've always liked jazz. Whether it be this fast-paced musical roller coaster that's just this wild, chaotic jumble of notes, or a more concentrated, slow, mellow jazz piece. For as long as I could remember, I've always appreciated the genre, from Miles Davis to Chet Baker to Whiplash to Blue Giant? Wait a second, this got an anime? So Blue Giant is a manga, one that I've always heard its name being tossed around in circles I'm in, but there's always been this hesitation with me picking it up, and that's not a hesitation that's unique to Blue Giant. It's specifically manga that have this type of plot, that either have to do with musicians or just anyone that has a passion for music as a whole. It always seemed like the lamest thing in the world to me to read something about people that obsess over their music and perfecting their craft, but when it comes time for them to actually perform the song that culminates everything they've worked for, we don't hear it. It quite literally is just music notes drawn on top of character sprites. So when I saw that Blue Giant got an adaptation, a movie to be more specific, I was excited. And it was, well, how do I find the right words? I feel like the strongest point that the movie was trying to get across was that it had a budget of 100 Monopoly dollars. Okay, I'm obviously exaggerating, and I usually don't have as much of a CGI hate boner as other people, but emphasis on usually. Since in this particular case, the CGI is not even used to just cut corners. It's used to straight up just animate almost half of the movie. But even with my severe grievances with the budget, there's a reason I still put this so high on the list. The important parts they nail on the head. CGI isn't going to detract from a great storyline and some amazing characters that are just an utter joy to follow. I also want to give the studio some props too. This doesn't feel like a production that just wanted to take advantage of an amazing IP and cheaply spin it into an anime for a quick buck. This feels like a passion project coming from a studio that never really had much capital to begin with. One of the things that sold me on the quality of this adaptation was a scene near the beginning of the movie. But first, Blue Giant has a rather simple premise. It's just about these youngsters who all happen to be 18 years old who form a jazz band, and they dream of playing in the most prestigious jazz club in Tokyo. But every band has to start somewhere. Their first recital is not the greatest, and one of the things I appreciate the most in the scene is how the soundtrack takes into account every single mistake and flaw within the band's performance. And speaking of the soundtrack, if you're a fan of jazz, you'll love it. Full stop. The whole production just emanates a love of jazz. The shots all feel deliberate, the wild, exaggerated gestures and aerodynamic style of play makes jazz seem fun, seem alive, which is actually one of the core themes that the show presents, since jazz is kind of a dying genre. Constantly throughout the show, we are hinted at the fact that a newer and younger style of jazz is what's needed to resurrect it. And our main crew just so happens to represent a newer and younger style of jazz. I love this movie a lot, and now I actually kind of really want to read the manga now. So for this next section, I just wanted to do something a little special. So I actually made a presentation for this section. It's called Why You Should Watch Record of Ragnarok. So it's got a lot of cool gods from Greek mythology and a ton of other different cultures, but not just gods, religious figures too. And then the gods have to fight humans to determine the fate of the human race. It's a really cool show with a great concept, and honestly, if you like what you're seeing on screen right now, I'd give this show a chance. Although don't set your expectations too high, since what I've been showing you were really the moments taken directly from the show that clearly way more time and budget was put into it. So if you like my slideshow, you could hold your applause because I got another slideshow for you. I've been a Record of Ragnarok fan for like 3 years now. I've been caught up with the manga for the entire 3 years, so I think I'm qualified to say that as a community, we don't know what the fuck y'all talking about when y'all saying this shit got an anime adaptation. It just straight up does not exist. Okay, no, for real, Record of Ragnarok is an insanely straightforward, insanely targeted piece of fiction. Just full stop, if a life and death tournament arc between God and man doesn't sound cool to you, then this series isn't for you. The whole show is basically just fights, but it's so damn impressive how much they manage to accomplish in each fight. Each one tells their own story and builds upon its own stakes. It really made me rethink the question of what makes a great fight. Is it how big and muscular each competitor is, or is it something more nuanced? Because I genuinely confused myself with organizing this list. Like, how could I possibly justify giving Record of Ragnarok a better writing score than like 3/4 of all the anime on this list if it's literally just one big tournament arc? And then I realized that fights are much more about storytelling than it is a dick measuring contest. The way this manga allows us to get attached to these characters through their stories, and then suddenly one of them is dead because someone has to lose the fight, it's not something that you'd expect to make you feel these strong emotions, but it does. It's also so cool to see all the references to gods and famous figures who battle it out, and how they're all given their own fresh personalities and weapons. Like, genuinely, even if you hail from any of the religions showcased in the series, I feel like you'd still fuck with these interpretations. Hell, I was raised Christian, and I blew my load reading Adam vs. Zeus. My favorite fights are Adam vs. Zeus, Buddha vs. 7 Lucky Gods, and then Jack the Ripper vs. Hercules. Not to say any of the other fights are bad, honestly, all of them are great. It's just that these ones were the standouts. Maybe the plot of Record of Ragnarok should happen. Everything is so polarized right now. That'd be incredibly unifying to watch Trump fight for humanity using his neck pussy as a weapon, and then Kamala obviously using her coconuts. So, One Punch Man was published in a Seinen magazine and not a shonen one. I guess because it has blood in it? And so here's the story with that sentence I just uttered into universe. I wrote it down and then I realized that fucking Chainsaw Man is in Shonen Jump. The lines are so blurred within this genre, it's not even funny. So One Punch Man is something that I definitely don't even have to give an introduction for. Season 1, all the way back in 2015, took the anime community by storm. It's about a protagonist who, very much like in 376 Isekai, can one-tap every single living organism if he so wishes. But unlike 376 Isekai, this character trait is treated like a character flaw, or at least that's how Saitama sees it. Like, obviously there was a time in everyone's life where they looked at themselves in the mirror and unironically tried to turn Super Saiyan or throw a Rasen Shuriken. No shame, we've all been there. But Saitama has been there, done that, and he treats his omnipotent anime bullshit powers as a curse. One Punch Man is a comedy on paper, but I feel like a lot of people, including myself, associate OPM with so much more. Like, yeah, it's pretty funny from time to time, but a lot of the episodes ended up surprising me with shockingly compelling stories and characters. And the world is also really sick. So I watched all of Season 1 and the Walmart Bargain Bin Season 2 before even thinking of this video. But a ton of people have hyped up the manga and especially the art, so I was really excited to check it out. I reread all the events of Season 2 with Garo's whole story, and yeah, you guys weren't fucking lying. You know, as much as I'd love to disperse my propaganda that manga readers are elitist, pompous assholes, for this whole video so far, there hasn't been a single instance where the manga readers were annoying about a certain series, and I didn't end up agreeing with them. I read up to the end of the Orochi fight, and everything I've read up to then was pretty sick. Mushishi is one of the best episodic series I've ever seen. I've always heard so much about this show, so I was really excited to get into it. And my initial reaction was just pure shock at how a show whose story resets after 20 minutes could have such an effect on me. The way each episode is directed, to the writing and soundtrack, I just completely fell in love with the show. Mushishi is about Ginko, who's this monotone dude that kinda gives off wise mentor vibes. But he researches Mushi, which is an existence that is harder to explain by just saying they're ghosts. They're supernatural entities that exist without any purpose or goal other than simply just being. they can't be classified as good or evil because they aren't bound by categories. And Ginkgo travels from place to place being led by Mushi rumors. A lot of the, how should I say this? Pretentious bunch out there who flock to this show would say things like, oh, this anime is great because it doesn't have any of the generic action or fan service of anime. But honestly, I feel like if you're saying this, you're probably that same guy who praises movies because they don't have Adam Sandler in them. You're not wrong, but you're catastrophically missing the point. Every episode in this show explores and builds upon some type of overarching theme or idea essential to the show's purpose. And I think that's the thing missing from a lot of episodic shows out there. It's about connecting everything in the end, and that's why I think Mushishi is a great watch. Kaiji is a gambling anime, and so when I saw this genre tag under its description, this is the only shit I could think of. But I actually had some hope looking at it from the outside. It didn't seem like psycho-sadistic fascist cat girl was on the menu today, but I never let go of my suspicions when going into this anime. But this show is tough. I ended up enjoying it so much for a reason I only realized after watching the entire show. Because in retrospect, looking at all the various gambling / death game anime out there, especially after experiencing Kaiji, they all feel sort of cheap. No Game No Life has a sick aesthetic, but half of the quote-unquote genius strategic plays are pretty much strategic asspulls, and for a vast majority of these types of shows, they aren't as witty as they might think they are. My point is that the people in Kaiji are actually just smart people. So smart that I actually found this show to be one of the most unpredictable rides I've ever had in anime. And it's funny how my mind immediately went to compare this to No Game No Life, because now that I think about it more, these two shows are genuinely polar opposites. Kaiji is this hopeless, grim, psychological tale about a man willing to literally gamble away his entire life to repay his massive debt that he owes. It's really a commentary on the lengths that we as a society are willing to go for money, especially in scarce circumstances. And then No Game No Life, which is about these whimsical gamers who get isekai'd into a colorful game world and game so much and game so hard that they literally game all over God himself. I just found the comparison funny. So yeah, watch Kaiji. I had a great time with it. Wow, what a ride this was. So I read the manga for this one, obviously, and I could definitely see why this was such a controversial manga when it was still releasing. Edgy doesn't even really begin to describe it. The show just reeks of bleak nihilism, which permeates through the manga's harrowing monster designs. This author really has a knack for conveying this claustrophobic horror, where he describes these unthinkable creatures who shouldn't exist, and it's as if they're a rejection of the main character's existence from the universe itself. But by far the most disturbing part about them is their intelligence. They're not destroying in some senseless fervor, they attack with purpose, and even hold vendettas against humans. In the beginning of Gantz, the characters are only faced with reasonable sized creatures, but as the story progresses further and further, the beings the main characters are tasked with killing start to literally escape even fantasy, with these warped incorporeal deities that give off this quiet, indescribable sense of cosmic horror. The monsters are more than just their designs and power, they project raw terror into the characters, and anyone who gazes upon them immediately loses hope that they might make it out alive. And that is my favorite part of Gantz. For context, this author is actually a very interesting guy, as I later found out. He ended Gantz on an extremely controversial final chapter, and apparently a ton of people complained on the internet. So in his next manga, Inuyashiki, if you remember it from before, he made Hiro, one of the main characters, brutally murder those same people who criticized Gantz, but just in the show. So to say it simply, this guy is fucking insane. I will now explain to you the premise of Gantz. Gantz is about a group of randomly selected ordinary people who get stuck inside a weekly nightmare. They lead normal, uneventful lives for 6 days, but then on one of those days, they will be sent to this room, forced to kill some being beyond normal comprehension, which usually ends up in tragedy, and then are expected to return back to their daily lives like nothing ever happened. Overall, Gantz is something that I can't possibly recommend to everyone. Even I found it really disgusting from time to time. But by far the worst, most batshit absurd thing to ever happen in this show is the blackface mass shooting. And if you got immediate whiplash from that horrifying combination of words, imagine reading through it. It was rough. And I'm not even gonna lie, that same scene was the chapter I put down Gantz. I really love a lot of things this series does, but a ton of shit that happens in this show is just straight up unnecessary. Most of which I won't even name because I fear demonetization. I probably will pick it back up in the future though, but we'll see. Now, this next section might come across as corny to some, but I feel like to a guy whose magnum opus is a stick figure I doodled in class with dicks substituted in for all of their limbs, Blue Period was a show that spoke to me on a level that I really wasn't expecting. Because this show is about a kid who throws away everything to pursue his newfound passion in the fine arts. And I don't really care much for the fine arts, but it still spoke to me. While I haven't thrown away everything in order to do YouTube videos, I do consider this my passion. I mean, like, honestly, if it wasn't my passion, that'd be kind of concerning because of the sheer amount of hours I put into every single video. And if you want perspective on that, imagine the game you have the most hours on. If the hours don't have 4 digits, then that's probably around the same amount of time I put into every single video. I do it because I want to, not because I'm just soullessly chasing the bag. If I was, I'd just re-upload like Penguin Z0 clips or some shit. And Yaguchi is the same way, financially speaking. Pursuing a career in the arts might be the single greatest career path if you're passionate about your job at McDonald's. But he does it anyways because he wants to. And watching Yaguchi dive into his passion headfirst with so much at stake was something I always came back to week after week. It was truly a reflective experience, and it's not just artsy kids or people that have some insane outlandish passion that I think would enjoy this. I truly think that anyone could easily find something to like with this show. If not the passion, it'll be the incredibly likable characters or the great job the show does in conveying the process of art. And I mean, of course, this show's description of the artistic process would be great because the story is coming from a manga author, and these guys literally draw like 24/7, so they're probably the best to comment on stuff like this. I was obsessed with this anime in my teenage years, and I even loved Tokyo Ghoul Route A, which had a popular rumor going around back in the day that every time you say the name of the season out loud, a manga reader dies a horrible death. So I went ahead and read the manga for Tokyo Ghoul out of sheer curiosity, and my findings were, well, not really special. I liked it. I actually liked it a lot. Tokyo Ghoul lives in a modern world where these supernatural monstrosities known as ghouls prowl the underworld. And it's the fact that they live off of eating flesh that makes them the ultimate enemy against humanity, and one diametrically opposed to their existence. But then comes Ken Kaneki, someone who, due to an accident, turns into a half ghoul, half human hybrid. And while hybrid shows like this are a dime a dozen nowadays, the way that Tokyo Ghoul handles it feels the most refreshing to me, even considering how old this manga is. That hybrid plot point in Tokyo Ghoul is utilized less as a way to gain cheap power-ups and more to philosophically transform the series from a very simple binary black and white type of show to then suddenly introduce this moral gray zone where Kaneki really illuminates through his condition that ghouls and humans are two sides of the same coin. Tokyo Ghoul introduces some great themes and very frequently goes to very, very dark places. Also, even as a grown man, I still really really fuck with the whole style of the shit. The art is amazing. The characters are sometimes really edgy, but I don't even care. They're so cool. And it was only after reading the manga that I realized how much the anime skipped, even season 1. To put this into perspective, the last event that happened in Tokyo Ghoul season 1 occurred around chapter 60 in the manga, which if you think of it is absolutely psychotic given that the anime is only 13 episodes. One thing that I think the anime never really captured all too well is the insanity of Kaneki's transformation from Shy Boy to Edgelord. In the manga, there are so many events that happen between Kaneki getting kidnapped by Aogiri Tree and him getting tortured. So much development happens within this time period as setup, and it was just completely cut out from the anime. Also, another thing I realized from reading the manga is that Tokyo Ghoul Ru-A is genuinely just an entire season of Tumblr fanfiction. Kaneki never joins Aogiri Tree, and the season tries to mimic the events of the manga while basically having a borderline unrecognizable main character. And then I never finished watching Tokyo Ghoul Re back in the day when it was coming out, so I can't really comment on that. I hate to be one of them, but I've joined the dark side. Just read the manga, bro. Oshinoko is a masterpiece of emotions. The author knows exactly how to pull on heartstrings, when to do it, and how to make it have a lasting effect on the audience that will persist for the entire show's duration. Oshinoko is about acting, idols, YouTube, social media, and all of those things combined. But it's a seinen because of its absolutely insane plot, where these two random fans of an idol girl reincarnate into that idol girl's children. But then the first episode plays out and all of it culminates into a scene that can make a stone monument cry like a baby. Then both of these siblings get all emo and vow to take revenge on the perpetrator. And this show accomplishes a ton with this premise. It sets up a show that will easily develop into a dark cat and mouse game that will definitely keep the audience always guessing. But it also sets up for a very unique show that tackles the inner workings of various industries like idols, acting, and a variety of other adjacent industries. But one thing I love about it is how it covers shit that anime never usually considers, like dealing with cyberbullying and traversing certain social media sites. And it's so dumb how I say, oh, it tackles some rare issues that anime normally doesn't cover, and then I'm just talking about how the show has the characters using the fucking World Wide Web. I have no idea why I'm watching an anime in 2024 and then just still be using flip phones. Like, come on, we gotta move on, bro. But anyways, this show looks absolutely beautiful from just a visual standpoint. And this is one of the shows that I genuinely struggle to find anything wrong with. When writing this script, I felt so compelled the entire time writing about this to compare it to one of my favorite animated films of all time, Perfect Blue, since they tackle similar themes, but they are so fundamentally distinct in everything but theme that the comparison would mean less than nothing. Although I do feel like what made Perfect Blue transcend everything else was not its theme, but how it executed on its theme. The movie accomplishes communicating its message in this concise, downright artistic fashion that I think might be the one thing missing from Oshinoko that I haven't seen yet in the anime. Land of the Lustrous is about immortal androgynous Steven Universe gems that fight against the witches from Madoka Magica. So from my understanding, this show flew under a ton of people's radars, maybe because it was full CGI, but I'm not even gonna hold you. The CGI genuinely enhances the show incredibly. I mean, just look at it, come on. It's made by the same studio that did Beastars, and people genuinely jerk off to that shit. So in my investigation to find out why no one really talks about this anime, I searched up the manga, and I found that this has almost a 9 rating on my anime list, which is basically Fullmetal Alchemist numbers. And the reason I was doing my investigation was because I really liked it, and was sad that nobody seems to really talk about it anymore. So Land of the Lustrous is about Phos, or Phospholite, who is honestly a great protagonist. It's rare for a show's main character to capture my interest just by pure virtue of their specific attributes. But Phos's specific attribute is that she's a fucking dumbass, and boom, I'm hooked. If there's one thing that I'll always defend in media, it's regarded as characters who are sometimes so dumb they're dangerous. But I think characters like that are so insanely interesting because first, they're funny as hell. And second, they always introduce a factor of randomness to whatever show they're in, and usually end up moving the plot along in ways that the audience would have never expected. So seeing a dumb idiot in the driver's seat was instantly interesting to me, especially in a story with such a unique world. So let's talk about that world. Land of the Lustrous takes place on Earth. But wait, why are the only sentient beings rocks you'd mine for at Y level -50? Well, we don't know, and that's one of the many mysteries of this show. There are 28 crystalline humanoids who are named after gemstones, and they all have some sort of job to accomplish in their long lives. Some of them are tasked with fixing and melding people back together after they're injured, and others are to defend the realm from moon invaders, who are alien things who hunt down gemstones to take them back to the moon and turn them into decoration for the rest of their lives. Yeah, it gets pretty insane. And we, as the audience, kind of forget that this shit is all insane because we're experiencing this story from the perspective of this easygoing airheaded protagonist. I just love how the mystery is presented and ultimately unfolds, and I really appreciate the themes that Ichikawa was going for. Wealth, fame, power. The man who attained everything the world could offer, left his treasure all in one piece. This is clearly the Seinen version of One Piece, with the only real difference being that it's set in the early 1900s Japan, and instead of pirates, the crew consists of, a dysfunctional military veteran, the Scat King, and some tribal folk. Oh, and I also forgot to mention that they need to locate several criminals and skin them alive in order to piece together a map to the treasure. Okay, yeah, this shit is nothing like One Piece. So this show was passionately recommended to me by my significant other, and I decided to respect her opinion and get to it almost half a year later. But wow, I do not regret giving it a shot. But the first episode of the anime made me spit out the water I was drinking, since I have heard stories, folktales passed down orally from generation to generation, and was surprised to see that it originated in this show. But those stories all revolve around this thing. This is not just a bear. But let me explain. Do any of you guys remember X-Arm? Yeah, it's like one of the producers of that abomination infiltrated the production of just this one episode, squatted on top of it, and shat on it. That shit is this bear. Literally, the rest of the anime looks good. It's just this bear, which is unfathomably right smack dab in the first episode, which is supposed to hook people in. So just cover your eyes when you get to this scene. The rest of the show is good, trust me. So Golden Kamui is about this psychopath that tattoos a bunch of criminals, promising each one that they have a map to his treasure that they themselves can decipher. But it turns out that a single criminal's tattoos isn't actually the map. It's a fragment of it, and they can't actually read it themselves in the first place because it stretches across their entire body. So the only reliable way to read it would be to skin them alive and look at the skin on a flat surface. And that's exactly what Sugimoto aims to accomplish. So he meets up with this tribal girl, Ashripa, who's actually my favorite character. I like her design and personality, but furthermore, I love how her culture of the Ainu is developed throughout the entire show. It feels all so believable to me. And that's actually because the author expressly borrowed various cultural traditions from dozens of ethnicities and combined them all in the Ainu. Even if it's an amalgamation of different cultures, it all still feels solid. Like before their coming of age, parents would name their children after revolting names. Like one kid is named like Boner, one guy is named Dog Shit. And it actually makes sense, like just think of it logically. Like have you ever met someone named Bob who looks nothing like a Bob would or should look like? They give them real names after they actually develop into fully grown teenagers and actually develop their own personality. I just love how they have their own unique customs, language, and food. Actually, food is a big part of this show too. I guess the author knows a lot about this stuff because when the show is not a fucked up One Piece creepypasta, it always goes in depth about how the crew hunts and how they prepare meals. Honestly, it's very educational, but that's not why we're here. We're here for the action, the skinning, the Scat King. And trust me, those are all here in a big way. There's so many moving parts to this show, like trying to figure out who's actually in cahoots with who and keeping track of the sheer number of different factions and groups that are looking for the treasure, even down to the fucking military. Every single criminal that is introduced is just so... I can't even give a broad description because they're all so different. One guy is this masochistic sailor that gets a boner every time Sugimoto holds up a sharp object because he imagines himself being brutally slaughtered by him. Another guy practices taxonomy for a living, and it's revealed that he killed all of his close relatives, stuffed them up, and started hallucinating conversations with them. Also, this guy makes fucking BDSM outfits out of human skin. He isn't even a criminal either. I just want to talk about him, to be honest. Every single character is so fun. I feel like one of the reasons this anime is slept on is because of the bear, in all honesty. I'm serious about this. That bear did more damage than Hurricane Sandy. Golden Kamui would be more well known than Jesus Christ himself if it wasn't for that stupid ass bear. Guys, I finally get a fucking chance to talk about Castlevania, finally. And I know that some of y'all are probably thinking, like, isn't Castlevania made in America? And yeah, it is. And this brings up some valid concerns, like, if he's talking about this shit now, how would we know he's not gonna list fucking Family Guy as his all-time favorite seinen? Well, personally, I primarily decided to add Castlevania to this video because I just wanted to, but also because of how seinen it is. And I'm not even talking about just the gore, but don't get me wrong, Castlevania is easily a contender for one of the most, if not the most goriest show on this list. But it also tackles extremely mature topics, and wait, what? They actually use real curse words in this show? I've honestly never watched an animated show and genuinely been taken aback by how potty-mouthed all the characters are. Whenever a character would insult someone, I'd just be like, whoa, that was just mean. And it's not like this show is just this edge fest with characters cursing and spilling their guts all over just to keep the audience's attention. The dialogue is some of the most snappy, some of the most smart and subtextual language I've ever seen. There's just so much personality embedded with what these characters are saying and how they say it. This is also partly a product of some god tier voice acting. And then to add on to that, Castlevania is honestly funnier than some comedy anime, despite it not even being one. The author is just an insanely good writer who can also just be funny whenever he wants to be. Also, wait, let me rewind a little bit, because I never actually described what this show is actually about. So Castlevania is a story that will be familiar to you if you've ever played the Castlevania games. But if not, Castlevania is about a classical rendition of Dracula. Although in this case, he actually finds love. Lisa is a woman who seeks out Dracula because of tales of his scientific knowledge at a scale no one else at the time could even come close to. But with the absolute death grip that the church has on humanity, they ended up deeming Lisa as a witch for her pursuit of the sciences and burned her at the stake. Then when Dracula found out, he got really mad and exacted his revenge on the humans. He basically started committing genocide. So now the story focuses on Trevor Belmont, Alucard, and Silpha as they attempt to kill Dracula. But it's not just that. There's so many moving parts to this show. There's also Isaac, who is by far my favorite character in this show, who basically acts as the second main character. And then don't even get me started on the action, which is literally some of the best choreographed and some of the most creative fights I've ever seen. Like, you know how in JoJo's the whole Stan's power system introduces a whole new layer of complexities to the fights in the show? Well, Castlevania seemingly accomplishes that same level of complexity and ingenuity with barely even a power system. Characters will use anything in their environment to their advantage to triumph in fights. I seriously adore the show. Please watch it. Unfortunately, it is a Netflix original, but I checked in with my best friend on the internet and he got you covered. Dorohedoro was a special case when deciding whether to rank the anime or manga, because it's not like the anime was horrible. Actually, it's not even bad at all. I watched it like a while back when it was coming out weekly, but here's the thing. I've always wanted to read Dorohedoro. So I went into it and my god. Okay, this is the first frame of the anime. And then this is the first panel in the manga. Yeah, I did not regret my choice. So Dorohedoro is about a place called the Hole, which is exclusively inhabited by non-magic users. And the actual magic users of this world treat people of the Hole, and by extension non-magic users, as less than insects. And they cross over a lot of times into the Hole to test out their magic on people, which ends up leaving a lot of them fucked up looking. Which is why our protagonist, Kaimon, looks like that. So he's trying to find the person that originally fucked him up so he could turn back to normal. Him and this entire main cast are just so damn entertaining. They all match each other's freak on a level I've never seen before. Every single character is so weird in this show, but I'm not even saying that as a bad thing or anything. It really just adds to its charm. But the real thing that charmed me in this show is the world. Dorohedoro might be the most original, trippiest, creepiest, and imaginative thing I've ever read. I am under the philosophical assumption that nothing can truly be original. The way that certain series can seem novel on the outside is by taking from so many inspirations that it becomes virtually impossible to trace things back. But Dorohedoro is something different. Everything down to the power system and curses, to the characters and their strangeness, to how this show literally smashes multiple genres together and it still stands on its own. It's this visceral, dark and gritty steampunk hellscape, but it's also inarguably a fantasy because of the magic. I'll go out and say that this is the most unique series on this list. I was gonna say that I absolutely recommend you read or watch this, but like honestly, the art was such a treat in this manga, and the anime never really replicated that immersive atmosphere the manga gave off. So if you can, read Dorohedoro. You won't regret it. Okay, y'all know what time it is. Thank you so much for bearing with me throughout this entire video, although it's nearing its end, and you all know what that means. We're going over the GOATs. But before that, I really have to emphasize that more than any other video I've done like this, I've really had to dig deep to find out the order of this top tier. Because so many of these are not just my favorite seinen, but also some of my favorite pieces of media ever. So I could 1000% see a valid argument for any of these placements changing, but this top 5 is what I ultimately settled on. And also a reminder that these videos take such a long time that I don't even bother to count the hours anymore. So I have a Patreon. I was planning to do a video where I take recommendations and then compile them into a video like this. But you know, I need Patreon supporters for that. Okay, listen, I didn't think I'd ever get to this point in the video where I'm talking about Kaguya-sama, but here we are. And here is the actual proof that the manga was published in a seinen magazine. So now that this show is in this video, we can't get rid of it. It has to be here. It's the undisputed pinnacle of rom-com. Kaguya-sama has been the most consistently funny anime I've ever watched, but even if the anime is focused a lot on just telling structurally well put together jokes, Kaguya-sama also sold me on one of the greatest romances to ever grace anime. It's one of those hyper rare shows that keeps getting better as the episodes go on. I love season 2 more than season 1, and I absolutely adore season 3 over season 2. But it's not just the jokes that get funnier or the romance that gets more romancy. The show starts out wielding its power premise that the author just drives home with honestly just objectively funny moments. If you don't know, the premise of this anime is that the top 2 students at a prestigious high school are secretly in love with each other, but neither of them want to confess their love, so they each try to play tricks on each other to try and make the other one confess first. And this is all through their absolutely over the top antics. And that's what this show is about in the beginning. But then it evolves, and it's clear that Aka isn't just a funny author, but also one that's capable of truly great writing. I mean, we've seen it also in Oshinoko. And it's the fact that there are some serious character-defining moments that are surrounded by goofy antics that just amplifies its effect. And it just makes it hit harder. The same could be said about the romance. Overall, Kaguya-sama is the best comedy, at least for me, but it's also not just a comedy. This is a show that will make you feel every emotion when you watch it, and I think it's truly special for that. Two things I knew about Monster, or should I say 2 quotes I knew about Monster before even watching it. Quotes not actually from the show, but quotes that people heavily associate with the series for one reason or another. Whoever fights with monsters should see to it in the process that he does not become a monster himself, by Nietzsche. So now, if you don't know, Nietzsche is a guy who's widely known as the nihilistic philosopher. Like, have you ever heard God is dead and we have killed him? He said that shit. You can't unironically say some shit like that. You'd see if you sorted by newest post on r/IM14 and this is deep and not have me label you as the edgy philosopher. So already Monster left me with a sour, edgy taste in my mouth. And then actually the second quote is from the first scene in the anime. It's a Bible quote, but not just any Bible quote, a Revelation quote. Undoubtedly the most dubious book in the Bible. For the entire Bible, we read about turning the other cheek and being a shepherd and shit. And then you're just hit with Revelations, which is basically just about dragons and prostitutes. And I'm not joking, by the way. I've read this entire book. It's got some crazy lore to it. So Monster is about Tenma, who has saved countless lives through his successful career as a surgeon. But this story is about one of those lives he saved that he ultimately regretted. Johan is a boy, but as Tenma sees it, he's a pure evil monster. A psychopath, a savior, the Antichrist. Johan is a lot of things to a lot of people. But to Tenma, and by extension the audience, he's someone who indiscriminately leaves death in his wake. Monster is one of the most well-written psychological mysteries I've ever witnessed. It's a cat and mouse tale of epic proportions that always leaves us wondering if that Nietzsche quote will come true. In his journey trying to kill monsters, does Tenma become one himself? Monster is a very slow-paced, dramatic story, but slow-paced doesn't equal bad. Sometimes it feels like people confuse slow-paced with nothing happening. Some stories out there definitely suffer with the plot just not progressing at all, but Monster's plot is a consistently paced marathon. That's why I call it slow-paced. Absolutely 10 out of 10 writing, and Johan is a peak villain. Although if you came here looking for some gory nuts to butts action, Monster is not where you should look. Yeah, this is probably going to be the most predictable top tier I could have ever made, but honestly, these series have the acclaim that they do for a reason, and I'm not gonna subvert expectations for no reason. Like, these series are just good. So assassinate me if you want, but I've actually never read Vinland Saga, so after season 2 I have no idea. For me personally, if I were to rank this 5 years ago without season 2, it'd be at least a couple tiers below where it is right now. A lot of people hold season 1 on this pedestal for its great action and characters, and yes, I absolutely agree, season 1 is a fucking banger that had me gripped for its entire duration. But I think season 2 transcends everything to come before it. Season 1 of Vinland Saga, which manga readers refer to as the prologue, felt like it had a little bit of an identity problem as a standalone. Thorfinn is out for revenge and it consumes his entire being, so much so that he literally dedicated his entire life to killing one man. And as a result of an action-packed plot like this and a 4-year break between seasons, so many people misunderstood the show. Even I was shocked at first when I initially went into season 2. It threw me off so much, in fact, that I actually dropped the season after watching it weekly for a couple episodes. But eventually I came back to it after all the episodes came out, only because my brother was really into it. And I'm giving this background as me being an anime only just to reject the notion that this is some slice of life slavery edition or some farming simulator or some corny Gandhi bullshit. I understand if it isn't your thing. Yes, it could be slow paced at times, and yes, it's 1000% an incredible departure from the action of season 1, but that's simply what Yukimura had to do to be able to accomplish the profound message he was always trying to convey from the start. And you know how people say the expression, it's not what they said, it's how they said it? I don't think anyone really thinks that non-violence and pacifism is some revolutionary theme or concept to put into a story. It's just the way that the theme was subtly cultivated within the narrative from the beginning. Vinland Saga has one of my favorite main characters in anime and manga in general. His journey from beginning to end resonated with me in a way that I would have never expected. He objectifies so much negativity and hate and projects that hatred as his whole purpose in living. Then when that object of hatred that he spends so much of his life with is ripped away from his grasp, his entire reason for living is stripped away too. So what now? is the question that I think Yukimura answered with such brilliance that he inspired an entire vein of TikTok edits and compilations. On a complete side note, I absolutely adore how a large part of the anime community in particular really gave this series a shot and learned to accept it for what it is. And also, hearing all those edits using Nujibi's music was fucking surreal. It makes perfect sense because his music fits so well with the show's vibes. I've been a Nujibi's fan forever. He did the Samurai Champloo soundtrack, by the way. Just a casual recommendation in the middle of a fucking Vinland Saga review. But yeah, I started ascending towards the end of Vinland Saga. If anything would convert me to Buddhism, this will be it. Please watch it. That's all I gotta say. Berserk. Where the fuck do I start? Well, actually, let me start by saying that I actually did watch some of Berserk 2016 for this video. Obviously, I have functioning fucking eyeballs and I'm mentally well. The manga is way better than any adaptation ever got and will get in the future. Of all the manga that people say is unadaptable, this is the most unadaptable. But I've been mindlessly shitting on Berserk 2016 for years and I never actually watched it. So I called up the boys, said I was watching Berserk 2016, and then watched it all through by myself. So now that my brain is firing on all cylinders and I'm loaded with video essay talking points, I'm ready to make my case for this adaptation. Yeah, so Berserk is one of the most influential and culturally transformative dark fantasy manga to ever come out. Think of it. Without Berserk, no Dark Souls, which means no Elden Ring and no Bloodborne. Without Elden Ring and Bloodborne, like what are we even doing? What's the point in living? So Berserk means a lot to me, as you could see. But seriously, it has hands down the most beautiful artwork to ever grace manga, and a story that had an unprecedented effect on pop culture, and it's something that I'm sure will keep sending ripples for generations to come. Talking about the manga itself, I think Guts is up there as one of the most compelling protagonists out there. He's a deep character who's so much more than just a brooding lone wolf carrying a hunk of iron. Griffith is just flat out one of my favorite villains of all time. And on that topic, Berserk depicts and handles scenes with mature themes in a way that is so uniquely nuanced. The world is this grim, twisted medieval fantasy that is enthralled with these layers of dark ancient evils. And overall, Guts and the events of Berserk set the stage for one of the greatest revenge stories ever told. But then, Miura, the author of Berserk, died. And first of all, rest in peace to an absolute GOAT. It was over 2 years ago now, but he will still be always remembered. But his story, with a third of its runtime never being completed, leaves us with a bittersweet taste in our mouth. But that's actually not true. Berserk has been getting a consistent stream of chapter releases done by Miura's friend, and I'm not saying that they're bad, I'm just saying that they're not Miura. Its artwork is probably as good as it can be, and the same could be said about the storyline, but the dialogue just doesn't feel right. But to be completely honest, even if Miura stayed alive for longer, I think Berserk would still remain unfinished. He was a man that was obsessed with perfection, and for the most part, perfection is a lifelong endeavor. Kingdom is my favorite piece of underdog media. It's one of the most grand, one of the most wide-scaled, and one of the most beautifully told stories I've ever had the pleasure of watching. Okay, I actually just thought up the genius idea to show clips of the anime over my love confession for the show while I was editing, but of fucking course I read the manga. Like, come on. There is no argument to be made here for the anime. Actually, I think bad anime is a blessing in disguise, at least for us enlightened manga readers, because it bolsters our ranks, think of it. An anime that everyone hypes up beforehand releases, and then it is universally agreed upon to pretend that it never existed as a community. But then it's the perfect chance. Manga readers slither on the scene and then be like, hey bro, respectfully, this shit will never be adapted into something that the producers don't wipe their ass with, so you might as well read Peak. The difference between manga and anime producers is that Togashi breaks his back delicately crafting his life's masterpiece, and then Cloverworks breaks the hopes and dreams of every single Promised Neverland fan out there. I'll probably still be referring to this absolute fumble even when I get old and feeble. So Kingdom is one of those One Piece types of series where you look at it from the outside, see the amount of chapters is in the triple digits, and then you also see the 8, and then you're just like, no thank you. And I absolutely understand that mindset because I was also extremely reluctant to get into it. But seriously, by about 30 chapters or so, I was so glad that this shit had 800 chapters. I genuinely never wanted it to end. Kingdom is about an insignificant boy living in the era of China's warring states, at a time when the country was sectioned off into several different territories that were perpetually engaged in warfare. The manga is actually surprisingly accurate in a historical sense, but that's just the bigger picture. If you're a scholar in Chinese history, this story wouldn't be ruined for you because Hara is able to expertly portray this historical event while adding some necessary details to make sure the story is comprehensive. Shin is just a war orphan of no esteemed background who eventually makes great friends with the Prince of Qin, which is one of the states in the warring China. And the story first follows these two as they struggle to find their place inside their own state. But it's kind of like Hunter x Hunter, where we spend so much time with a countless number of arcs taking place in the mainland, then suddenly we're thrusted with the exciting revelation that the mainland that everything happened on was just a tiny island sandwiched in between an entire continent of mysteries. When Shin and Sei, who is the prince, do establish themselves within their own state, we're given that same sort of excitement when the audience realizes that there are still 6 other territories of similar or greater power that the characters have to overcome. I find it really hard to express my sheer love for this manga, but I think a lot of it has to do with Shin and Sei. Shin dreams to become a great general under the heavens, and Sei dreams to finally unify the warring states after a long 200 years of fighting. Shin may seem generic at first as a block-headed main character with big dreams, but over time you see this orphaned kid really turn into a man who can truly back up his dreams with his own strength after overcoming a countless number of bloody wars and battles. Then you might turn and look and see Sei's background as a prince to a territory as large as like half of Europe and think he might be some spoiled entitled brat, but he himself might be as much of an underdog as Shin for reasons that are pretty much spoilers. But he also has to triumph over conflicts, whether it be internal political strife, military decisions, or just the drama of trying to rule over such a polarized state. Also, one of my favorite things about Kingdom is just seeing every general in action. In One Piece, Luffy wants to find the One Piece, but there's obviously no precedent for anyone who's actually found it and achieved Luffy's goal who's still alive. But in Kingdom, Shin for his whole military career works directly under the generals that he aspires to be as he examines their strategies and actions. My point is that Shin's goal is tangible and close enough that he could actually study these generals. Yet, at the same time, despite the close proximity, his goal always seems so far away. And this distance is created by just showing us how damn cool every general is. And it's frankly a testament to Hara's sheer intelligence that he himself can write characters so damn smart. Like, a ton of people compare battles and war as just a strategist on each side playing an overcomplicated game of chess. But this is beyond that. These bitches are playing 8D chess. They constantly come up with strategies that take into account terrain, resources, and honestly ideas so out of the box that it just casually redefines what warfare even meant at the time. But not every general plays the same exact game. Some of them just lead the charge straight into the enemy and just win because they're that much of a force to be reckoned with. And others are so familiar with war that they genuinely just rely on their instincts while commanding their force of over 100,000 men. And then others have all 3 traits. I just really love this manga. If I already didn't make that clear, please read it. You will be doing yourself a favor, trust me. Alright, so that marks the end of the list. Thank you so much for staying around, whether you skip to the end or watch the entire video. If you made it all the way here, you might as well subscribe and hit that like button. It helps me out. Thank you to my Patreon members. I really want to do some cool engagement with my Patreon members where I do a ranking video on anime or manga recommended to me by Patreon members. But as you can see, that video will definitely not be coming out anytime soon. So become a Patreon member to support the channel if you like this ultra high effort content, and also if you want to have direct input on some of my next videos. Also, join the Discord if you want to talk. It's actually where I'm going to be uploading the actual tier list because the tier list maker link never worked for some reason. Link is in the description to Discord. So this was like 2 or 3 months of my life I'll never get back, condensed into one video. It was definitely the highest effort and longest video I've ever put out. I really hope y'all enjoyed. See you in the next one.